All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome, everyone, back to the Lethal Introspection Podcast. Brand new set, brand new everything, even a brand new guest. Here with us, we have
Lindsey Ash.
along with the regular cast.
Hannah Metro. You have to warn us that we're doing this.
And I'm Matt.
That's right.
What is that?
Got to come up with a catchphrase.
Each one of us. That'd be
Yeah.
great.
We have like a little zinger that goes with our name, you know.
Next time.
Oh, that'd be great. Let's think about it. Homework for next week.
There we go.
But this week we need results. All right.
Next week?
This
Are we doing these weekly now?
by next Friday? Obviously,
I
This
need it
is-
on
we
my
need it
desk,
on
by
my Friday.
Yeah.
If you haven't seen the movie,
Yeah, that is a clean. Thank you, Hannah. Such a clean segue into the title of the movie, BlackBerry. Because my goodness, what energy this movie brought. The reason why I am captaining the ship right now is because I'm the one that decided that I really needed to see this movie. I watched the trailer. Haven't been a giant Glenn Howerton fan for about a decade, almost two now.
Yeah, 15 years or something like that.
Only thing I've ever seen him take seriously is B. Dennis Reynolds, and It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, and his ability to be able to mantle that energy onto something else was something I really needed to see. I was also very glad because I know that both of you love both Glenn Howerton and It's Always Sunny, so you guys would be able to nitpick appropriately with me or praise accordingly. And Lindsey is a professional creative in every single way of the word. And as a result of that, her word will bring a little bit more weight and credibility to what we're trying to do.
oh jeez, no
Finally.
pressure.
Gee, only took 7 years.
Yeah,
Here we go.
exactly.
Just been in school for a while.
Yeah, exactly. She was cooking the whole time,
I
and now
was.
she's finally out
Now
of the
I'm
oven.
in the kitchen.
Yeah.
It was all coming up to this day.
I've been honestly, that is why I went to school.
Yeah.
I was
be
like, I
here
just need to bring credibility to this.
Yeah.
I could see the potential, and I was like, earning potential
She
and
was
numbers
just
and
finishing her bachelor's degree, and she's like, I gotta go for that master's.
I-
It's the
yeah.
only way.
Yep.
But either way, in podcast tradition, we always go with the thoughts of the new person.
Oh,
So,
wow.
Lindsey, what did you think of BlackBerry?
I think they did a really good job. It was clearly a lower budget film. For context, I was at USC getting a Master's of Fine Arts in Acting. So I'm a big film fan in general. And I do often, when I watch films, think about like the story structure that's involved in the writing and then in the filmmaking itself and all of that. And so I tend to notice those things a lot in films, which can be both. I mean, it's really helpful in settings like this when we're like, let's talk about it. But in other settings, it's like I have to try to put it on mute a little bit. But it was definitely a lower budget film. One of the things that stood out to me from the very beginning that I loved that they incorporated so much was their use of comedy, because it made it so authentic, and the dialogue was really, really, it was really natural, and the comedy so seamlessly bleeding into that dialogue in such a real way, because it wasn't forced comedy. It wasn't like we're telling jokes, we're having these moments. It was two characters with such opposing point of views in life and such opposing ways of going through their life and different values. And when they would talk to each other, they would just naturally miss each other because they didn't do what the other person did. And so I'm thinking specifically about Jim and Mike, obviously, in this. So like the hard hitter business guy and then the super genius tech guy. And it's like, these are two very different people that value very different things. And watching them communicate with each other. And then, of course, our comedic relief Doug showing up when he shows up, but who also has different values and is very much in it for like the fun and the love and the passion for the work. So seeing all three of those characters interact with each other just naturally led to comedic moments that I just found to be really really fantastic for such a like low budget random film that I hadn't heard about before this day. It was like, it was really well done. And I would expect it to be, and the acting in it from both Mike and Jim. Jim was, yeah, he was fantastic. Like really, really good. So yeah, anyways, that's a little tidbit on just something that stuck out to me right at the beginning.
Wonderful. See, audience, professional.
What makes it stand out to you as a low budget movie? Because like hearing you say that, I'm like, oh yes, thinking
You
back
see
on
it.
it. Yeah, but some like I only identify a movie as a low budget movie when it's like really obvious, like it all takes
Right.
place in one room, or it only has a couple of actors, or like it's a found footage type of thing.
I see what you mean. Yeah.
What is
think,
it that set you off?
And
in that
maybe I
direction?
should double check. I mean, I actually haven't done research, so it could be that this movie has like a higher budget. But what made it
Yeah, I don't
feel
know.
like it's not? They had a lot of like following shots rolling through. They used a lot of kind of almost a found footage quality for a lot of their shots, where like we're moving with the camera and we're kind of like in the office setting, and we're watching and we're with this character and we're with this character, but we're not cutting in between. We're not doing multiple takes. We don't have multiple cameras happening simultaneously.
Oh.
Like, so they were using a lot of those types of shot, or corner of the room for their master shot. They're not, they obviously aren't manipulating the room and getting the whole, like, there's no wall here. We have an actual set designed in this. We have this room with walls, and we can't tear down this wall and get a shot of the whole room.
Oh,
We have to go in the corner, and we have to maybe jerry rig something on this desk to maybe get a shot that kind of shows the back room over there, but also shows all these guys working on this computer being goofy over here. And it's like, it felt like a director intentionally utilizing any sort of financial obstacles they were facing as opportunities for like, how can we actually use this as a way to kind of tell this story in this shot? Because I know we don't have the time or the money to make that shot happen, but we can still do it in this way. So that stuck out. The color gradient stuck out a little bit. Like it wasn't like the editing was good. They did a good job, but again, they weren't hard to edit things. They went with a very kind of colorless color palette almost. Like it was a little drained. It brought us kind of to that early 2000s feeling.
It's spring in Ontario, so it's like
Exactly.
just wet and kind of lightly gray.
that early 2000s feeling could be intentional.
I definitely think it was. Again, I think it felt to me, and this
90s.
Yep. And it felt to me like the director was like, how do I utilize the low budget as a way to actually tell the story even better? Right. And so one of those examples would be, yeah, like let's utilize the fact that we are telling a late 90s, early 2000s story. Let's have it feel like that a little bit. And that's going to cut the costs, because we're not talking about, Barbie in 2023. We're not talking about that level of grandeur and the resources involved in that and making a whole separate universe. It's like we are trying to take it back to almost a nostalgia era. And for the most part, you could get away with a lot going in that direction. So that
And
stuck out. Yeah.
It's got a lot of, I don't know if it wasn't, one can only hope it's at least lightly intentional, but a lot of meta synchronicity with what with the actual subject matter, in that at the beginning it's a small startup, so the only thing they could do is a shoestring budget that you can only hope you're getting paid at the end of the month, kind
Yeah.
of thing. So having the video quality of the movie that's showcasing that kind of rise would also be, it would just mesh so perfectly, because otherwise it would have to be more of a documentary-esque kind of situation then, right? Which, can work, but fortunately they went with a far more, got it. Yeah, like you said, they went with a far more like found footage kind of situation. Like someone's in the bushes watching these guys do the work, and then slowly but surely, then they bridge it all together like some sort of stalker kind of thing.
Well, and it almost had a documentary quality at times that I was like, but it wasn't, but it had that feeling very clearly to me that, that we're looking.
There was a moment or two where I thought that Jim's character was gonna break the wall and like talk to the camera, like as like the camera
Yeah.
crew, like behind the camera kind of thing. Like it almost looked like he was going for it, but then it was just part of his, running to the next office or something like that. Like, but I guess maybe that just showcases the power of the character. Matt, what did you think?
First impression, yeah, the things that stuck out to me, I thought the comedy was kind of surprising. I was not expecting it to have that much comedy, although it did sort of suffer. Like in the last third, it did that thing that like romantic comedies do, where they're pretty funny for the first 2/3 and then a little more serious in the last. But I really enjoyed that. I also noticed the color grading, which felt nostalgic, and I really liked that too. Yeah, I mean, Glenn knocked it out of the park. He was exactly what I expected. You know, I don't. It's weird to watch Dennis Reynolds in any other place, but that there he was. You know, so I found that surprising too. I thought it was generally okay. I'm hoping to like it more as we talk about it here. So,
Okay.
yeah, that's where I'm at right now.
You thought it was generally okay?
Yeah. I don't want to like give away like a rating just yet, but
No.
For sure.
yeah.
We have to till the land first.
Yeah.
Well, and I have thoughts too on like it's also not my type of movie necessarily. Like it's not one that I walk away being like, whoa, my mind is blown, you know, because it is it's a biographical film in a way, you know, and it's following real life stories. So it limits the amount of creativity one can have in a story.
Yeah, there's no surprises.
Yeah.
There's no twist ending coming.
Yeah.
Like we all know the history of everything that's happening in the film.
Yeah.
So there's not much. It's all driven by just the characters and the creative techniques used in the filming.
Yeah, you just can't go too crazy with it. Like it's just you get what you get with the history of it, unfortunately.
What about you, Hannah?
That's interesting to hear. I think I look for something different out of these movies. And I think that's just like a perspective thing. I think it has something to do with I work in tech. So there's in the industry that I'm in, because it's such a difficult industry to succeed in, there's something that you get working in tech that you're expected to know all these stories, all of these success and failure stories of all these other companies, tech companies. And usually how you get that is you read a book about them because they get written after the fact. Like these are the shortfallings. So I was really excited about this movie because I'm like, they made it a movie. I can just watch the movie. I don't have to read the book.
That makes sense. That makes sense.
Because like experiences really, because it's brand new all the time. So other companies' experiences are the only way you learn these things. And this has a lot of deeper tones and the things we pay attention to as well in failing companies, which is like failure to prioritize the people who build the stuff, failure to treat them in a way that's going to keep them rallied and energized and in a space that's creative. Not to get too far down that path, but I really enjoyed this movie. I agree with what was said about the comedy. I thought the comedy, it was really like remarkably funny without feeling like a comedy. Like I heard someone in the room refer to it as a comedy and I was like, that's weird. It doesn't feel like a comedy, but it's funny. It's not like, I wouldn't not call it a comedy because it's not funny. It's super funny. Yeah. And sometimes it's so serious that it's funny. And I really that's something that I really like about Dennis's character in Always Sunny too, is like, it's so shockingly serious that it gets like that, like surprise laugh and then like a natural laugh. So yeah, I thought it was really cool. I really enjoyed myself. I felt very tense when bad things were happening, even though I know what's going to happen. I was like wringing my fingers out.
I felt that too. I felt very tense throughout large chunks of the movie.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know why, but yeah.
That brings up a question for me. This is a little bit, maybe we want to circle back to it, but it's interesting, and it comes up when I watch any sort of like based on a true story or a historical film. I love it when I see films that are based on true stories that go rogue with their endings, specifically because of this tension relationship of like when we're watching these protagonists, like I want to see them succeed, you know? And I think what was a little bit hard for me in this one is I realized our protagonist wasn't actually Mike. Our protagonist was actually Jim, because we're watching him as a tragic hero, not overcome his flaws. And that's why it doesn't succeed in the end. And again, that's like a structure of story writing that shows up in almost all films, is like, we're going to see someone either comedy and rise up and get what they want in the end, or tragedy and they lose everything that they have and they got everything they wanted, but we watch them lose it because they don't improve. And I think about, this movie, for example, we all know how BlackBerry And like we know what happened to BlackBerries
We
for
have
some
the vibe,
right?
We know they're not holding
we're all
BlackBerry.
we have that comment while we're watching it is like everybody's holding iPhones and I have a Galaxy, but like we're holding these
And
phones.
funnily enough, BlackBerry got bought out by Android, and that's why they're no longer the market competitor. In
Exactly.
That way. Yeah.
And
Because
so
the BlackBerry OS, the
Yeah.
BlackBerry OS just hadn't been upgraded in such a long time that they're like, just defunct it and we'll do our own thing
Yep.
from here on out, essentially.
Yep. And so I don't know. Sometimes I watch these movies and I'm curious how other people would feel if they just went rogue in the ending and had almost like a totally different approach to telling the story, especially with you coming from tech. You were watching it as like a historical.
Supposedly, the way this movie ended, what did go rogue? I mean, like, this is supposedly not that much of a biopic. Like, it's supposed to be like a conglomeration of things that happened even further than 2007. Like, things didn't accordion that quickly in that time. So they really are doing that in their way, but it's just so hard in not knowing the actual factual story down to the last T that you can then be like, okay, this is where they deviated, because it all, at least to me, right, not having a full background of BlackBerry and its corporate situation, it seemed like that was the logical way of going about it. But from a narrative perspective, I feel like it makes perfect sense that Jim, without realizing it, his dark aura pretty much starts permeating into everybody else around him, and like the way that he wants to run everything in like a rudderless way of just power seeking, because he doesn't really have a goal. He's like, I got fired, so I'm going to try to take advantage of these guys in order to be able to then put myself back in a CEO position and then be stressed in the way that I like being stressed, essentially.
It's the game.
Yeah, I think he was a capitalist through and through. Like he loves playing the game, and he only knows the game. Like he doesn't know anything else but playing and trying to win the game. And I think that's what we watch him do the entire time.
Yeah, but that's where I say he's rudderless even in that way, right? Because I mean, he was already, captaining one of the largest corporations that was, a juggernaut in their particular industry, and he's just out there playing games with the NHL, not doing, he's playing out. You guys that you're watching The Wire soon, you'll see that he's playing away games right now. He's not being about what he was what originally brought him the merit and the profit is no longer what he's seeking to perfect. He's now trying to do something else by himself.
Well, he caught it, so it's not interesting anymore.
Yeah.
Well, I think, again, this is the tragic hero story. I mean, his flaw at the beginning is either greed or some variation of it, right? And we see it in the fact that he takes over Callahan's thing of being able to present the tax documents, and he wants to be the one doing it, whether it's greed or power, whatever. He is constantly seeking that. And when we see him now not prioritizing this company, it's because he is going towards his flaw. I think that was more of a writing to show that he's not improving or putting this time towards the company. He's moving towards this flaw of greed or power seeking, etc. That's why we see the downfall ultimately. So
I don't know that it's greed or power seeking, because it was a through line
what's a
of
better word?
like with Callahan, he was like, he's a goof. Which, I think he was like, he can't do a good job. And, I think it's about winning is what it seems like.
And pettiness.
Right.
He's watching that Forbes list all of the time, seeing the same people that made him look like a fool during their little meetings. And now he's like, oh, how am I going to be able to make it so you're the one that looks silly at the meeting?
Yeah.
That's really what he's looking for.
That's a good point.
And they even gave you just a tiny snippet of that when he does that scene where he brings back the guy from Palm Pilot who was going to buy them out. And then he's like, oh, come here and sit down. Yeah, like that's what he wants. He would just love a room full of those instances over and over and over again.
Like Hannah said, winning, like just constantly.
Yeah, he got
winning.
off. Yeah. It was mostly sexual, for sure.
Oh, capitalists.
I think there's something delightfully refreshing about skipping the character arc, because the character arc is something that I expect in every single movie, and there's something that's unique that I can't name another example of, at least off the top of my head, where Jim's flaws are the through line from the start to the end
Or they're
of the
consistent,
movie.
yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
They ruin him at the beginning and they ruin him at the end almost, you know, like they throw off at least what he's shooting towards.
And they ruin others at the same time, because at the very end of the movie, blanking on the co-CEO's name,
Mike.
thank you. Yeah, Mike pretty much begins to mantle Jim when he's no longer around. After the big time gap, at that point, he's essentially absorbed enough of the qualities that he lacked before without the... I mean, not that Jim really has tact, but at least he's had years of doing the exact same way of being, you know what I mean? And pretty much
Playing the
gaining
game, yeah.
that reputation around town, that it doesn't come off goofy, you know, when he wants to start yelling or whatever, right? It's like, okay, even if you don't take him seriously and you're like, you're not my dad kind of thing, you know, at least it doesn't come off goofy, you know, like that's never where your mind ends up with it. But then when Mike does it at the Verizon meeting and he starts trying to do that exact thing and trying to just make up things on the fly and try to make big promises, you know, everybody can see through it right away, just because he doesn't have that kind of...
This is one of my favorite things in this movie is the like juxtaposition between Mike and Jim's character. This is a super real thing in business all the time, especially at the really high levels, is because like at the point that we are with technology, all companies are tech companies. So you have the business guy always who makes the pitches, who gets the money, who finds the funds. And then you have the guy that knows how to make the thing happen, you know, knows how to build something that works and will grow and will sell. And I mean, the roles are exaggerated in this case, but this is like a really, really common thing. And I loved seeing in this movie because you're like, once it starts succeeding, you're like, of course it works. They have both the things that they need in such a concentrated level. And then when they start separating and one starts compensating into the other one's skills, you're like, no, you need both of those things really strong in order to succeed.
This is when I was thinking about when I was watching this movie, is this would be a great example to show somebody to explain what enshittification is and how it happens. Are you guys familiar with that term? This is like when you think about Facebook and like what Facebook is today in 2024 and compared to what it was like when it came out, where it was just sort of this fun, light, chat with your friends type thing. Well, then they hire on more board members. They start adding to their stock price. Now it becomes about appeasing board members and less about making a cool product. And this just snowballs over time until eventually you come out with, you look at Facebook now and it's just a pile of shit covered with ads. And that's like the majority of what it is. And this tends to happen to almost everything, right?
Well, because they have what is it? I forgot. I just came across it like a day ago or something. The requirement to make the company profitable for its market shareholders. It's like their market accountability or whatever. And they're required
They
to
have a fiduciary
Yeah,
right
that's what it is. Yeah.
to their stockholders. They can't do anything that would, by the nature of the action, reduce stock prices without getting stockholder and voter consent, essentially.
Right.
Because then at that point, it's a dictatorship a corporate dictatorship at that point, even if it's like good intention kind of thing. You know?
Right.
It's like, it's the tipping point of like when that shareholder priority beats out the original vision, it turns into something it was never meant to be.
Right.
Because every decision should lead to what you wanted to build in the first place. And as soon as you lose sight of that, you start building something different that your users didn't join for in the first place.
Yeah.
But then how does growth exist within that what should I say, that
It doesn't. Businesses
set
live
up.
and die because they hold a niche, but the environment around them keeps changing. And they showcase that with the cellular companies, wherein in the 90s, when they first went and did that pitch to that guy, what were we selling to people? We're selling minutes, you know, and everybody perked up because literally that's what the environment was. We were all eating minutes at that point, right? And they're like, okay, so once they managed to be able to corner 45% of the minute market, the only means by which other competitors and smaller shareholders of the industry sector were able to compete is by shifting the goalpost from minutes to data. And by doing so and being the first on the block to do so, AT&T Singular was able to then undercut Verizon in that, well, at least in the movies, you know, the way the movie showcases it.
That's the problem, though, is like selling minutes isn't a vision. If you start with that, then you are going to have an end date on the journey that you're taking. If your vision, like Apple's vision from like the beginning has been about putting power in people's hands. You can always find new ways to put power in people's hands to do more things themselves independently. And
you mean like a company mission statement?
Yeah, depending. I just mean like what their why.
Because I was talking about just the industry environment at that point, right? The industry environment, because of the infrastructure and technological limitations of the time, the only grass was minutes at that point that everybody could eat, right?
And then it became data.
And then eventually, because of the stimulation in the infrastructure to make more minutes, eventually there was, just like with how they went into the room initially and they're like, there's free internet in this room right now that nobody's tapping, right? But at that point, they were only translating that as a means of making more minutes and like more line-to-line telecommunication as opposed to packet data. And,
Yeah, I just meant how to tie that back to Lindsey's question of like, how is there sustained growth? It's like Apple used to be a computer company. They're not anymore.
Well, just thinking
computer
about
isn't
this,
the answer anymore.
Right. And I was thinking still on that. The reason I asked that was more from this sphere of like how a tech company starts being this, here's this idea I have. And then they hit that idea. And then there's either the expectation for them to be like, great, they achieved their idea and they have to maintain the integrity of that idea, or what is actually the case, especially in a capitalistic economy, they need to shift it into the new next thing. It needs to be that idea is now a stepping stone for the next idea. And we even saw almost the failing of not doing that in this, with Mike being like,
with the keyboard.
It's a keyboard. Why would you have a phone without a keyboard?
He
he couldn't
like a
even.
Caveman
Yeah, he literally exactly. But like
you lose all credibility in that moment.
Well, and that it even ties back to like my relationship with the idea of obstacles as opportunities for advancing something, and in this case, like making a film with low budget, right? We can use those obstacles as opportunities rather than obstacles as fearing the change of it, fearing the where could that lead us? How could that exist? I'm frustrated with the fact that I even need to abide by that. And that's what we were even seeing with Mike, where it was like, well, why on earth would we have a phone without a keyboard? That's the dumbest thing I've ever seen. And like, it couldn't even break the brain to go to that place. So then it's not surprising that the companies or the cellular companies are like, there's 1 minute in a minute, but there's unlimited data. So like from a capitalist perspective, and then on top of that, where are we going to go after data? If we're following this same argument that we went from minutes to data. Yeah, exactly. So if we're going from minutes to data to what's the next thing? Yeah. And so it's just, it's the commodification of the next big thing to commodify,
Yeah. I like the fact that it isn't that the environment is so aggressive that there can't be a mono corporation that can handle all of those things, because with every single advancement that BlackBerry did, Steve Jobs or somebody taking notes.
You never get to rest.
Son of a bitch. Yeah, okay. Yeah, you think your keyboards are so cool? Yeah, I'll show them.
That's wild. Yeah, that was
especially because at the end of the day, what this movie feels like it shows to me, right, is that like a person like Jim, the personage that they're trying to showcase through his character and through all of the other C-suite people that are like him, is just this desire for one-upsmanship in that way. Like the whole aspect of, when he was talking about how perfection is the enemy of good. Yeah.
Oh, but Mike's come back to that, and he's like, well, good enough is the enemy of humanity. And I was like, oh, that was like one of the greatest lines I've ever actually heard. I was like, that is such a good line.
And then he ate crow.
Well, right. That's what the irony of that in this, because he also did that. He was like, good enough is the keyboard, and like he couldn't see past that. But I was like, what a good line in a movie that is highlighting the both potential and flaws of a growth system and a company and an idea, and within capitalism, like what does that look like? And both of those lines embodied those characters perfectly. Like he was never seeking perfection. He was never seeking great, even like it was all profit. And then it was like, well, good enough is what keeps us from actually being able to excel as a species. And so it was just
And yet the movie does
Fascinating.
a really great job of pivoting the problem from a way that everybody in the audience can understand, right? Because the company is sinking, literally $1 million in debt. And at that point, regardless of one's, I mean, I felt, right? I was like, man, like, what would one do? Like, you just, like, that guy pretty much signed into a contract to be part of a company that was sinking, right? And he's like,
You get 30% of debt too. Like,
yeah, exactly. And then he's like, the only thing I can do is remortgage my home and then use that in order to be able to do payroll for 6 months, maybe, in order to be able to hope that I can sell something quickly enough to be able to recoup in that way. Like, man, that level of risk, like plunging, is unbelievable.
payroll
Mhm.
would eat your mortgage so fast.
so fast.
Like, it would just be gone, like 3 bites.
I would
Sounds
imagine he
really-
probably opened a business line of credit alongside that.
He
He's like,
would have had to,
I'm
yeah.
putting down my mortgage as collateral for this business line of credit.
Yeah,
Please give
that's
me
what it
$1
had to
million.
be.
You know,
And this was before the financial crisis too. So who knows how much of a loan he was able to get for that. You know, like he was probably able to mortgage the hell out of his stuff. Like they were like, we don't need to know if you could pay it back, you know? We don't even need collateral. Keep it.
I mean, we're all Canadian, eh? I mean,
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I feel like it's a really interesting deep dive into, like, because that's a very like specific personality type, right? The kind of
yes.
person, like most people are risk averse, and people like that guy Jim, silly ball Jim,
Ball silly?
yeah, like
Ballsly.
those are the type of people that are CEOs and COOs because they have that particular personality trait. And it was fun, like, yeah, it's just I feel like it was a really good showcasing of this particular type of behavior and outcome that comes from a personality type like that.
Mhm.
Well, it's like, if even just to have the balls to show up to people who started their own company and say, I can help you with my skill set. I want 50% of your company and to be called CEO. I would never make that request.
Well, and he was
I will
unemployed
never
when
know
he
what
did
that would
that.
do for me.
Yeah, that's banana because he was literally had nothing
Well,
when
the
he
guy
did that.
is a pathological omitter, right?
Yeah.
I mean, he tries his best not to have to lie to people, you know, which I thought
that's
was
a good
a really good like little thing that they inserted when they were having that ride in the car to the first presentation that Jim and Mike did together. Is like, let's just promise to each other that we're never gonna lie to each other. And he's like, yeah, okay. He was like, sure, you know.
Yeah, like,
Yeah,
all
he
right.
immediately responded with the truth, and I was like, okay.
Yeah, I thought that was so interesting. Also, just to tie back something I had mentioned earlier, how this personality type just seems to be immune to embarrassment, or at least showcasing embarrassment in front of people. Because let me tell you, right? I feel like a pretty cavalier person when I want to be, but man, I would feel like I would totally tuck my tail between my legs after some person who obviously knows what they're talking about to be like, "You're not a tech guy, are you?"
Yeah.
You know,
Oh
I'd be
my
like,
God.
And
you
yeah,
know, and then expounding on why your pitch is bullshit and why you're trying to sell me snake oil to me. You know what I mean? When would be the kind of thing that, in my personal opinion, would make me want to just be absorbed by the floor. You
or
know?
just even
Oh, yeah.
saying like, "I'm
Into
sorry
the
for
head.
wasting your time." Like he never did that.
He never says that,
like
yeah.
the saving face skill that you had mentioned was like so strong.
It's a unique
Mhm.
skill.
It was really,
Unique
really.
strength.
It
And
was really interesting
and
to watch.
it paradoxically all comes from a position of insecurity because of the fact that he doesn't ever want to have anybody have the mental picture of him saying sorry to them
Yeah.
in that context, you know. Because again, you know, every projection is a confession kind of thing, you know. And he really, like, even though maybe everybody else might not, but maybe they would, because they're all C-suite psychopaths, right? Where they're all pretty much replaying the same, you know, these delicious, like, petty games that they're playing with each other all of the time. And it's, you know, to have 27-0 call you out for your character and integrity, you know, from an organization that you've been trying to, like, weasel your way, or, like, you know, worm your way into when he's trying to do that NHL deal. I bet every single person there was like, yeah, fuck this Jim guy. It's like coalition of fuck Jim.
Yeah. We're on team fuck Jim.
Yeah,
But then
exactly.
he was so good at what he did. So it's like, it was interesting to see even the team of people at the beginning that were like, fuck Jim. We hate Jim. Jim's making us do X, Y, and Z, right? Like all the engineers, right? Then they're having movie night and pizza. And like, you could tell that they really respected Jim.
If
and
someone leads you to success.
yeah, it's like it didn't matter anymore that he was a total dick, because it was like he was good at what he did and led them to success. And so all of a sudden it was like, yeah, I'm not Jim's friend, but like I respect the hell out of him, as like he became their co-CEO. Like they all looked at him as a CEO, which was not like, obviously Doug was totally against that right at the beginning, and until the moment he switched, being like, yeah, no, you guys did it. You did something that I didn't know we could do and I didn't know how to do. And we watched him surrender to that truth, which was interesting.
Yeah, I think one of the reasons why the movie's comedy worked so well for me was because the comedic relief character in Jim's best friend,
And Mike's best friend, Doug.
yeah.
Mhm.
And Doug, he was the comedic relief, but at the same time, the voice of reason, which is not something that is usually done too often.
Well, he was us. He was the reflection of the audience, being like, how are you letting it get this way? How
Yeah.
are you doing this?
Yeah,
it's all our questions were reflected in him.
Yeah, he doesn't fall for pretty much the illusions that the illusions of like power that Jim is actively projecting all of the time. He's like, you're trying to get him to agree under duress, like he's able to, like when they're having their first meeting at the restaurant, and he actively is trying to keep Jim from pretty much signing a Faustian deal with this guy in that way. And I mean, yeah, it is sort of Faustian the entire way through, because at the end I really love that close up they had of Jim's face when Mike is sitting in his desk on his desk when he comes back and the SEC is right there, because he's like putting it all together and he's like, oh, this guy outplayed me. Like for the first time, this guy outsharked me essentially.
You see like a little tinge
You
of
see
pride.
it, yeah, exactly, yeah. He gets like a dark Padawan kind of situation out of the whole thing. Like, it's crazy, because is that a victory? It's like at that point,
I think in his head it would have to become that,
it
because
would
he doesn't know how to not see it that way.
Mhm.
So in his head, that was like the smiles, but the damn it.
It's like, oh,
And then
they're
the
in the next
smile.
round. Yeah. And on top of that, I mean, I bet that the first thing they teach you at Harvard business school is how to talk to the SEC.
Yeah, he's definitely
Or how to
more
not
equipped.
talk to
Yeah.
the SEC.
Oh, yeah,
The
exactly.
dude was avoiding talking to the SEC at every turn.
Yeah, he's like, you don't say anything ever.
Yeah, just don't answer the phone. Don't go where they are.
Standard boiler business business contracts. That's all they were. Was it different?
I didn't know
Backdates.
anything about that.
Yeah.
I want to bring up a question that Hannah asked earlier, and I thought about it again with Mike sitting in the desk, right? The masks that were like technically Jim's masks in his office. And from the very beginning, Hannah was like, are these just his personal masks in his office? Like, that's weird. And then we realized they were, because he's packing them up. And then we see them again in his office at RIM. And then we see Mike sitting in his chair at his office at RIM with the masks behind him. And so, I mean, my instinct was like, the masks we wear in a
That's what I was
business
thinking is
world,
like
you
Ben
know?
Stein's speech from The Mask. That was like
Oh.
playing through my head.
Wait, what's that?
You guys remember The
No.
Mask, the movie?
Well,
Hey.
a long
Yeah, the
time
Jim Carrey
ago.
movie.
Yeah, I mean,
Recap us.
we don't know the speech.
Well, you just like said the start of the speech.
Oh,
which
I
was,
did?
Like the masks we wear. Yeah.
Oh,
I don't
okay.
remember it verbatim, but that's what
Oh.
was like running through
It's
my head. Was
my favorite movie.
I've seen it 1,000 times.
I almost, with the way that they look, I wonder if there's some sort of like symbolism to them, and like they look like historical, maybe war
They look
type
like
of.
tribal, yeah. Tribal.
Yeah.
yeah.
Like it might be, there might be some sort of symbolism relating to that ties into like winning and sacrifices and things like that.
I
But
wonder.
I don't know what it would be.
Well, I just really wonder if that person, that real person, Jim, in life, that he must have had that. Like, I don't believe that being just like a random creative choice someone on the screenwriting panel made. Like it's got to be based on some sort of root truth of like, when I interviewed Jim, to write this, like there were all these masks in his office, and I was just like blown away by how to utilize that in a story, you know? So I'm so curious.
Or his house or something like
right,
that.
exactly.
Yeah.
And they were like, let's put those in his office. Like I could see it getting extrapolated for sure,
Yeah.
but it had to have come from something, you know? And so I'm curious about what that was.
Yeah, I feel like it might.
IMDb. I'm sure they have the trivia.
Yeah, everybody takes out their non-Blackberries.
Non-Blackberries.
They're
yeah.
gonna carry the
Non-Blackberry devices.
conversation.
Non-black palm berries.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's funny. Without our keyboards, that's why you can't hear anything on the mics.
Yeah.
Because as people are typing away, you can't hear it because it's just a screen.
But I can feel
How
it.
But you can feel
underutilized was Michael Ironside in this movie? What the hell? Like that dude. First of all, really cool to see him back in a film. I haven't seen him in forever, but yeah, completely underutilized. Sorry, I just had the wiki. I pulled up the wiki and I saw that.
Just
face, and I was
reminded.
like, son of a bitch.
He was there the whole time.
Yeah, and then Pro ZD making a cameo. That was pretty fun.
I do think they did a good job with it. I mean, it was a good film. It's not one that I like mark as, you know, a great film in my mind. And I might have to process why I feel that way. I think it's a challenge with biopics or, you know,
Yeah.
but it's hard too. Like it's pretty rare that I watch a biopic that I'm like, yes, or just anything that's really based on a true story that I'm like, that was exceptional. One that I'm reminded of in watching this film is The Big Short. I think The Big Short is a fantastically made film in how they did that. Like,
Is that a biopic? I thought that was just
it's not a biopic. It's not about a specific person, but it's about a historical situation. And they do follow kind of 4 characters in that. And it's very economically inclined. And the way they do it the whole time is just, there's such an overlap in, you know, the theme and the character and then the actual storytelling and the history of it. And it's like they're all really integrated. This felt for me that like the dialogue was carrying us a lot of the way through and the actors themselves were carrying us a lot of the way through. Like they were, because they had such good actors, especially in like Jim, Mike, and even Doug. Like those 3 really kept me invested in just being like, how is he going to get through this? How is he going to get out of this? How is Jim actually, like I was cheering Jim on.
It could have been
even
a
though
really
I know,
flat movie.
yeah, even though I know he's a tragic hero, like throughout this thing, I know he is extremely flawed and a dick. Like he's not a good person. And yet I'm like, BlackBerry can make it through. And that's how like just such good work in that because like the best villains, we are like cheering on and we understand them to some extent in why they're doing what they're doing, or we understand the human quality that they're bringing to the table, you know, and I felt that in Jim, you know, even though I don't love like the narcissistic behavior or the need to win or one up somebody, I like understand him and I know it's so human.
I
like
think everybody understands petty fuck you.
yeah.
We all get off on that, right?
See, and like there's something so great about watching someone just live in that with zero regard. Like there was something really fascinating for me about watching someone be able to save face in situations where he knew he was so wrong and just being like, I'm not going to say that though. Like, no, like, fuck you guys. Like, you guys are the fucking problem. It's not me. And it's like, damn, like, there are situations I probably could use that in that I haven't done something wrong and I still wouldn't do that, you know? So like that was really cool to watch someone embody that to that extent.
How do you think they made us cheer for Jim in that way? Because he doesn't like show kindness or like sensitivity or things that are usually given as like redeeming qualities to make you like feel for the bad guy, I guess, a little bit. But I felt sad at the end, you know, with like Jim going to SEC and like his acceptance of it. I was like, that's not what I wanted to see. That's not how I wanted this
It's so
to
different.
go.
That was the one moment that I would say consistency is what we get from him. He is so him. He is a person and he owns, like, that's why I think the tragic hero can be so enjoyable because they're so consistent. Because you mentioned earlier, like the character arc, and it's kind of, there's something satisfying about seeing someone start at A and end at A. Like there's something actually in, because we know that that's human. We know that some people don't change. And like watching someone be so consistent in that is really satisfying, I think.
But why do I want him to win? Because I don't want real people like that to win. You know, when you meet people that behave that way, you don't want them to like end up with their dream life and their dream company, dream job, on all of this money. Like that's... Is it because it's Glenn?
No, that's, I think, the storytelling.
I think it works because he's tied to a sinking ship, you know? So no matter...
Oh, the underdog?
Yeah. I mean, like, you know, right, by the basis of history that BlackBerry doesn't survive, right? So because of that, even though the protagonist is as you say, a tragic hero, you know?
And he earned it.
Yeah. He like you said, he's just so philosophically consistent.
Consistent,
you know, in his dark philosophy of not breaking, not breaking character. The mask will not break when he puts it on, kind of thing. That I think everybody would love to be that way to a certain degree. You know, there's
something admirable about it.
It's
you know?
Yeah, it valorizes an essence that's positive. The way that he uses it is incorrect.
Is exploitive,
right?
Yeah,
because he
exploitative,
he does it entirely from a narcissistic position of insecurity, right? He genuinely is very afraid of other people's opinion, and because of that, he would rather just be stoned in front of others, other than, you know,
or just have power over them.
Yeah, because then when he has power, he can be what he really wants, which is just angry. You know, that's all he really wants to be. He wants to be purposefully angry all of the time.
That was one thing that it is really interesting that as you were mentioning, Hannah, like the fact that we're rooting for him and we actually don't see any points of his life outside of business. We only ever see Jim
because business is life.
Right. And like when you're saying is like he only ever wants to be angry, it does prompt the question of, you know, what does he want? Like, obviously he's not motivated by happiness. Like he is motivated by power and control and winning and whatever that might look like. But it's really, it was fascinating to watch somebody that isn't governed by the desire to be happy.
And he's
you
not
know,
motivated
like he never
by money
is
either. I mean, like as capitalistic as the framework that he, you know, runs his narcissism through, and it pays him off for it, right? But ultimately, it's not monetary security that he's looking for. You know, it's just the ability to be able to rub shoulders with people and then show them that he's a little bit taller than they are when he puts the shoulder right next to them. You know, it's.
I noticed
mostly sexual again.
Yeah.
Well, everything is at the base.
Yeah.
He's the only person that always has an assistant, I noticed, no matter what position he's in. Or
That's
what
funny
company.
that you say that, yeah.
He's the only executive that
he
always
immediately
has an
hired
assistant.
Shelley when he got to, you're right.
And at the end, there's a different one. And he constantly tells him to do like tiny menial tasks.
Yeah, who was that poor guy at the end? That was his assistant.
He was great.
We didn't get his name, I don't think.
He was like becoming jelly on that desk. Just like, oh, I gotta tell the SEC what?
He was like, can I change my name for this?
Yeah. Yes, SEC. Yeah. We'll call you next week.
Yeah.
He said
And it was
he doesn't
like,
want to talk to you.
yeah.
He said no.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that poor kid. Yeah, that's a really good point that he just always had to have someone under him.
Or at least a layer or a buffer between him and the rest of the world, essentially.
Well, he has no problem like rolling right into a room full of people
And being like, get this person on the phone, you know, and they're like, who are you talking to? Which was so funny. Like, that was a perfect example of the comedy.
But maybe that is, like you said, it's insecurity, is like having an assistant follow you around all the time, like running at your every whim is a pretty good way to not feel like a failure on like day-to-day basis.
It's interesting. I didn't think of the word insecurity until you said that. I mean, I'm sure that's a root of a lot of, you know, desire for power, desire for control rooted in insecurity. Like I could see that just from like a conceptual standpoint, but it's not what I thought of when I watched him.
It's the tech guy conversation. He crumples.
Yeah,
completely.
He does, yeah, because he
deactivates.
realized he can't do that. Yeah,
Yeah.
he was like, "You're right. I don't know anything
Yeah.
about this."
Well, and
I
I
am the
like
dumbest person in the room right now. Fuck.
Yeah.
How did I get myself into this goddamn room?
Yeah,
Don't say
'cause
anything, don't
why
say anything.
would you think that the people around this this big wooden table would be tech people? Because like I don't know, not that position exactly, but I've been in that conversation because I work in tech, but I'm not a developer. And I don't go anywhere without the tech guy.
Yeah.
Because if someone asks me a question or says something like that, that's the worst feeling.
it's like I have no idea how to answer this.
I can't intelligently participate in this conversation.
That scene, although more nuanced, is very well mirrored to the one that Mike has at the Palm with the Verizon people, because he looks like he looks like an
looks
80s
like a
caveman in that 90s world moment. You know, he's the 80s guy.
He's the business guy.
being
Fool.
like,
It's
yeah, because he walks
mirrored.
into the room and he wants to pivot the whole conversation to a business conversation. What do you guys sell? You guys sell minutes. Fuck this community baloney that you guys are trying to throw down on people. You know, everyone can see through it. You're selling minutes. I can help you do that thing. You know, and it was beautiful. Yeah, he got beautifully deflated because then, yeah, the guy managed to repivot back on him so quickly of being like, no, like we already tried that. Like you think you're bringing new ideas to the table when we know what we're selling, you know?
There were a lot of parallel scenes like
No.
that throughout that I was thinking about. No, go.
The line "your competition is landlines"
Mhm.
I thought was brilliant.
Mm.
Like that probably is a way of thinking about their business that they may not have really thought about much yet. It's like you're not competing with other cell phone companies. You're competing with all those other minutes.
All the free calls that
Yeah.
nobody's getting charged for. Yeah.
All
Which
that
is-
free water, free air.
It's so interesting though.
No,
Yeah,
my
Got my
I
boys
know.
Nestle
My
on the phone.
libertarian watch.
See? Yeah, that's where we go. But yeah, but it's interesting because even that way of thinking was, we realize, because we're seeing the dramatic irony of the conversation that AT&T is having with Apple is about data, and they're still talking about minutes. So like even if they're talking about landlines being the competition, they're still behind. Like they're still not actually advancing with the times, which they've already moved to data, you know, and yeah.
I think it showcases really how all of history becomes a comedy with hindsight. You know, it's like,
But I
Given
wish they
enough
held
time.
that the whole time. Like you were saying earlier, Matt, that like it really lost that quality of like comedy for the last, and that often happens with a tragedy because it's just like, dang, this is heavy. But it's something that I see happening in work where we go from, I literally do like the thinker pose, because when I'm like, someone's making art, we're making art, you know, and like I thinker pose because it's like we're thinking about it and we're dark and broody and it's profound, you know, and that's where it started to head. Instead of like the beginning feels like it's almost satirizing itself. And I think there's so much power in telling anything historical where there is the element of satire that exists, because it always does exist. And when we're retelling those stories, there's the commentary on the absurdity of this story happening in the first place. Like the amount of luck that it was just like these two guys happened to meet this guy at this company before this guy got fired, paired off with these two guys. Like it was so, and again, I don't know how accurate that is. Like maybe he quit the company to go work for them. I don't know. Or as, you know, as the CEO of that, I don't know. But I mean, there's so much luck in that scenario. That's just like, how can we not laugh when these two characters meet? Because it's ridiculous that these two are in the same room at all. Like it's absurd, you know?
Yeah, especially since he was like, we don't do anything like that here.
Well,
Like,
right.
you have to
Which
leave.
And he was like,
kind of-
Pocket Link, change
Yeah,
the name,
like, how
bro.
did you get
know?
here? Yeah.
But and that pretty much lends credence to the mythologizing, like the mythologies that come with companies like that, in that it feels so luck, you know, it is so luck based that it eventually confers itself to almost like it had to be that way kind of
Right.
feeling to it. Because, you know, just because of hindsight in that way, right? Of a feeling that you have to go from land to, you know, tower to then full
Yep.
Wi-Fi kind of thing, kind of situation, where in reality what the movie showcases in little tiny popcorn bits is the fact that all of this is just quirks of the infrastructure, right? It's like there happens to be certain leaks in the network that allow you to be able to catch like what they were doing, you know, with the BlackBerries, and, you know, of initially being able to be like, no, we'll hold all your information here and then we'll transfer it over to your to the actual
Mhm.
item. So then it isn't just every 10 clients that can be held in one server. It's just one piece
Mm-hmm.
divvying
That's
out
just
to
the
everybody.
fault of the infrastructure.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like somebody that's smart, very, genuine geniuses just notice those little cracks in the way, because unfortunately, and maybe this also ties back to the movie in that a lot of the infrastructure is just a good enough project, right? It's like nobody's out there trying to make like the perfect of anything, really. Either both cellular networks, sewage infrastructure, all of the stuff is just good enough, put it out, people need it,
The enemy of humanity.
Mm-hmm. But at the same time, I mean, it's a pool for ingenuity, because in those small cracks, other people can begin to foster new means of being able to do, because imagine if like the landline system was perfect, right, and there were no seeming leaks in the ability to be able to use email and other stuff, what I mean? Like, we can't power up the data bandwidth kind of situation. Everyone just assumes that it's perfect, and it just stays that way.
Well, and I don't even. It's tough because while the assumption or the goal of perfection is not it, I will say I don't think that the infrastructure of the system even supports us going towards perfect, especially now. I mean, we talk about like
There'll never be enough time.
And now we're talking about bottom lines, and the way to get a higher bottom line is to not have products be that good for too long, And so now we're heading down kind of, there's like two different paths where it's like, sure, there's the possibility of innovation in fixing the cracks, but there's also not always profit in fixing the cracks or exploring potential within those cracks.
Planned obsolescence.
Right. And so like our phones could last forever, but they don't. And that's because it's not profitable for them to last forever. And we have so many technologies now that could be so much farther along, but it's just not profitable to make them that good. So that's why I think his line early of perfection being the enemy of good, he said good
Perfection
enough
is the enemy of good. Perfection is the enemy of good.
Good, and then good enough is the enemy of humanity. But it's so tough because, we're at a space that it's like we're kind of not even pursuing either of those things. Like, we think things are good enough, but then we also purposely keep them from being good enough. Like, we know they're not because there's no profit in that. It's like profit in the next thing that has one update change. And like right now, for example, Apple could have 10 phones lined up that all have minor updates, but they know that people are going to buy them because it's the next thing to
What do you
get.
mean could have?
They
definitely do.
See, you know what I'm saying? Like,
100%.
so like they have 10 updates lined up and they have minor changes on each that maybe offer a slight difference. But again, there's no goal in actually making something new and different right now because it's not.
Well, they would only be competing with themselves.
Exactly.
Therein lies another issue, is the fact that if you keep outdoing yourself and this goes out for everybody when it comes to your job, is like you don't want to be giving out 100% out there, because what if next year you're sick, right? And then next year you can only give 80%.
Exactly. And then they're like, wait, you did better last year. And it's like, well,
you're only ever as good as your last envelope.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, I think one thing that this movie like really, really shows well is that you don't ever get to sleep in this market. There's always competition. There's always like 1,000 like little startups like waiting to take over the market. Because like
pirates or sharks.
Even if they just make something interesting, someone's gonna buy it from them,
or just
and then
steal the idea.
Real
just send us a prototype and then we're gonna make it. Like if you're a small startup, like there's no record of that.
100%, and that's a very real thing. And then in addition to that, I think like there are definitely things like planned obsolescence, so that we're like, guaranteeing that people are moving on to the next thing. But there's also like, there's a rule of thumb in this industry that it's like, you will realistically maybe only build 20% of what's in your brain right now, because by the time that you build 15% of that, the thing that you need to build to make it is something entirely different. Like it moves so fast.
Yeah.
And this was like right when things really started to move fast in telecommunications.
Yeah.
Was in the early 90s, right when the internet was coming out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do have to point out my least favorite thing in the movie.
Oh yeah.
Is him leaving and it's purely only exists for dramatic timing or whatever, and it's him leaving the prototype in the taxi and then magically getting it back. And I was like, that was dumb. From a narrative writing's perspective, they could have easily had him like go to the bathroom and not prioritize getting to the meeting on time or whatever. Because like, I don't believe at all that one, okay, maybe I could see him leaving the prototype and not thinking about it, but in a taxi, I definitely don't believe he was able to get it back within 15 minutes. In New York City, within 15 minutes, there's no way.
You know how much
literally
stuff gets
impossible.
left in taxis probably in New York,
and then this was before the internet. This was before I took a picture of the
maybe
of
he
the license
called
plate.
the taxi then. But you still call the place that dispatches them, right?
Yeah, see, I'm sure
I'm pretty sure they got the taxi right out of the airport. They even show that, don't they?
They get an airport.
Yeah, but see, something like that, I think there was a better way to have a moment where it's like, for some reason, Jim is alone, and for some reason, Mike is not in the room, and we could have saw that all play out without ridiculousness of, I left the prototype in the taxi, and now I got it back. Don't worry. It was just like, why did that happen?
It must have been to heighten the stress.
It was. It definitely was.
Well, yes, but and this is the flaw in it too, is because when I see it left in the taxi and it drove away, I was like, you can kiss that prototype.
Yeah, exactly.
Goodbye.
That's what I thought. So
you're never going to see it again.
The fact they brought it back made me more mad. Then at least I believe
I totally agree.
He could have left it, and then it was gone.
Because that was the catalyst to the sweet scene where he got bodied by the people inside of that boardroom.
Exactly. So it was just like, it would have.
Oh, sorry, but I think that just showcases the way that luck plays into the whole thing, right? I mean, at least within the narrative of the movie, right? Because there's another universe, cinematic universe out there, right? Where Jim just goes home and maybe has a deep introspective reflection as to what the fuck just happened.
Cries himself to sleep.
Yeah, like tomorrow's a new day kind of situation.
I'm gonna be a new
day,
person.
new Jim.
Not a tragic hero story. It becomes a comedy.
Yeah, it becomes a full-on redeemed hero. Like that was his, trip to Hades kind of thing.
That's so funny.
Yeah, but it's like, no, reality is just like, no, Jim, you're doing just fine. Here's
that helps me identify actually. I think why that moment upset me even more is because the story is so character driven that was such a plot throw in. That was really just
to create the moment.
Let's throw this in for plot to create this other moment, and it would have been really interesting. And I don't think this lives necessarily in Mike's character, but I would have bought it for the fact that it's a character story. If Mike was getting irritated with Jim being like, I can do all this by myself, blah, 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 that Mike was the one that chose not to go into the meeting room until he did decide to let Jim flounder, for example. Now, that would have been an example of characters driving this moment rather than throwing it in for plot. We left the briefcase in the
I just couldn't see
taxi.
Mike doing
Again,
it.
I agree.
Not at this point of the movie.
I agree.
Yeah.
This is like, I'm only giving a rough example for the fact that
I agree with what you're saying.
It's such a character-driven story that what feels so wrong about that moment is it is so plot-heavy. And it would have changed the way I viewed the whole story. Like, we watched the whole movie. We were only, 25 minutes into the movie when that happened, right? And if Mike did do something like that, that would really have changed our perspective of Mike, and it would have made it so much more believable at the end of Mike becoming that person. Again, only as a rough idea. I don't necessarily think that's exactly what we'd have happen or anything, but I just think it's an interesting that leads to a story that is actually the narrative they're telling is aided by a character-driven approach into that scene rather than a plot-forced approach, and it would have been it would have just made more sense to me, and I would have bought that more than we're finding the prototype in the taxi and we left it in the taxi. And, it's just all of that was very external to all of the characters.
I think one of the reasons why, in my personal opinion, the movie loses some footing is because it can't really choose whether it is trying to tell the story of the entity BlackBerry and how it comes to be, or the character study of the people who created BlackBerry. Because I totally agree with you from a position of if this was like a story in a vacuum, right? This isn't a real company. We're just trying to tell an executive, people's story and how like this is a good way to humble a tragic hero into a better one kind of thing, right? Totally would work. But I feel like in the act of trying to tell the myth of BlackBerry, it really does help to the movie, the movie's pretty much mythology in having having it be so unbelievably be like out of the blue and like serendipitous the way that it works out that way. Because otherwise, like you said, it is 100% character driven, their growth and like the changes that they go about having. But it almost feels like, and this is where the movie flounders for me, is that they don't know whether that's really what they want to do, or if they're just like prisoners of fate, kind of, flowing through with what needs to happen all the way through. Because that's what gives, in my opinion, the third act of the movie, when they're already all top executives and BlackBerry's trying to maintain its position in the market share, that because of the fact that we all have the benefit of hindsight, that we know exactly where the ship is headed, that being able to see them trying to flounder against fate and try to like break fate in that way of being like, no, BlackBerry can maybe succeed, like you said, like maybe there is something that Jim can do to like beat the SEC or
beat the SEC. It's okay what he did.
Yeah, exactly. Or
slap on the wrist.
Yeah,
don't do it again.
He avoided jail time.
Yeah,
of course.
And also
they always do.
The whole act of the reason why Mike gets a spine, like Mike getting a spine in this business, is the thing that dooms him to essentially lose his company and lose his composure and lose the thing that made him such a good person to work around and be around and stuff like that. Like,
unfortunately, Jim is a shark and Mike is a sheep. Sheep have necks.
Sheep have necks, yeah. Shark only look forward.
Yep.
Shark has body.
Yeah, it's like Mike's insecurity combined with trying to like have a spine in this is really what threw it off. Is like, I mean, I've spent a lot of time with people who maybe not like come up with a whole app idea, but design an app, and that's like number one is you avoid people who get too attached to what they made because it's a problem. They're going to cause problems.
It's their baby.
They do.
Yeah.
Yeah. They get like, they won't listen to feedback from customers because they get sensitive about it.
What, they don't want a keyboard?
No, it was everybody else who was wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's where I think his insecurity came in, right when he was just trying to be like this Jim persona. Well, Jim wasn't there, but he took it in the wrong direction because he had too much skin in the game at that point.
He also didn't know when to be quiet, which is something that Jim tried to teach him.
That's why he
with
literally
the
was like,
whole
crumple the paper.
hand crumpling
Yeah.
situation. There was nobody to do that to him, and because of that, he's such. Maybe this is a funny aspect of like their Canadian, archetype of there has to be an excuse why there's why things are going poorly. Let me explain it to you. Like, sorry, this is the reason why.
First of all, sorry.
Yeah. First of all. Second of all, apologies. Let me start again.
Let me start again.
Yeah.
And finally, third of all.
Yeah.
I looked it up while you were talking about it. Apparently, that leaving the prototype thing in the car never actually happened.
Oh, yeah. Ooh, big
it
shock.
makes it even more egregious that they would shoehorn that stupid thing.
I'm bummed out because I love the moment that it created just with, Glenn Howerton's performance. It was like this moment of like, he just realized that he needs this guy. And I liked that.
You're
but
totally right. It doesn't need to happen.
The trigger totally
I'm
cheapened
like,
it.
I like it less and less the more I think about it, because you're totally right in that Mike could have been he could have been squirrely and in the corner the entire time with the prototype on hand. Jim makes a big ass of himself trying to sell.
That would be even better.
Trying to sell the
that's what I mean,
the corpo vision. And it's
Yeah.
like, no, there's tech dudes talking right now.
Like if he
Sit
just
down,
didn't want the tech guy to talk and he was like,
Yeah, like he
taking the
crumpled the paper
spotlight.
too soon, and then it
Yeah.
silenced the person that could save his ass in a moment of speech. Like there's so many character possibilities in that would have been really fun.
or they
to
could have
watch.
taken different flights and he was just a little late, like you said.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? It's like it would then at that point be, genuinely inevitable for him to get there just in time to avoid the whole how many clients can you have in your server before it crashes.
Because I loved the scene. That's what's so hard is I loved the scene and I loved seeing Jim be like, fuck.
The payout
And
of
then
the scene.
The payoff was great. Like, because we had this promise of this prototype, that was the lead up like for the last 25 pages, to be honest.
But it was done with fraudulent stock. The payoff. the payoff
Oh
of
my
the
gosh.
scene was done with fraudulent
There
stock.
it is.
Oh my
Full
god, this
circle.
movie goes so deep.
But like, I mean, it
They
was
did
like
that bad on purpose.
Yeah.
And like it was our first, we never even got to see the prototype either.
I got
You know,
you,
like
Glenn.
there was so much leading into that. Like that was that was Verizon's first time seeing the prototype. It was Jim's first time seeing the prototype, and it was the audience's first time seeing the prototype. So there was so much payoff to that, and we're all expecting something to happen. And then on top of that, we got to see Jim in a situation we've never seen him in. We got to then see Mike in a situation we've never seen him in. Be like, no, like we got to see him be the hero. We got to see him be like, no, I'm the smartest guy in the room. So
Yeah.
we got to see the guy that just realized he was the least smart when it came to tech stuff in the room. And then we got to see
Straight
his
up
partner be the
Dunning-Kruger on
smartest.
them.
And we all watched them and be like, this is why they're co-CEOs. And we all had that feeling simultaneously. So
Oh,
it's
yeah.
such a good scene. It's like the lead up into that scene was lame, in my opinion. Like it's just the fact that the scene is so strong and that the only reason we got there was like, oops, I left the prototype in the taxi and I got it back. Is
Yeah.
like,
The
it's
catalyst
so
of the scene was
lame,
weak.
you know?
Because the lead-in was
end
great.
of a
Taxi scene?
rom-com.
It
where they're
is,
like,
like,
running
it
to
really
each other,
is.
and then you miss the flight. But
So
then
it was,
she's here. At
like
the
I would
airport.
argue it's like one of the best scenes in the whole movie, and the fact that what got us there was like the end of a rom-com. It was like
Yeah, it's a
wild, you know, and it doesn't have me feeling like the serendipity of timing. It doesn't have me feeling that. It has me feeling like this was a forced thing that somebody put in, which I get it. Writing screenplays is so hard, and like it is a bitch. And so I do not say it from the space of like, well, obviously
for
you should have
sure.
wrote it like this. Like you wrote a screenplay and you made a film, like huge freaking success.
It's
Just I could identify that this was put in there to make this next moment happen in a certain way, and it's just who like the writer or the editors weren't able to kind of get out of the space of we just need this in there because we need this next moment to happen this way, you know, and like that's really hard to get over once the script has gotten to a certain point. And
Especially
feels
when
lazy,
they have such
though.
a meaty reason why they want to get there.
exactly, like the
They're
payoff
like-
is so good that they're
Yeah.
like, fuck it, the script is,
Yeah.
you know, they
Yeah,
leave the prototype in the taxi.
It'll
I don't
be
even
sour
care.
grapes
Yeah.
for a little bit, but it'll be sweet at the end.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So like I get it, and I totally understand where they're coming from and how it got to that point. It's just it's a bummer because that's where I value like the idea of co-CEOs in anything and the co-collaborators in the art making process in anything. I mean, it's having another mind go, yeah, we got to change that. You know, like we got to kill the darling. Like I know that you love this moment, and like what do we actually love about it? Because it's not leaving the prototype in the taxi. We love that Mike isn't in the room for the beginning of this.
That's
how
what
do we do
bums
that?
me out about it is because it's like it reads to me as like the writer was exhausted when they wrote this part.
And they're like, "Fuck it, leave it in the
Yeah,
taxi."
because like I don't write anything,
Yeah.
but I draw, and the parts I'm not excited about look worse because I'm tired.
the grass. I
You
was
wrote-
tired when
yeah.
I did the grass.
Yeah, and you're like, and I get that, but I mean, there's four of us. What is hard for me to swallow is like it passed by so many eyes, and nobody was like, "Come on, dude, he leaves in the taxi, and then he has it again."
Well,
Like-
at a certain point, it's like, you know, either collaborators are no longer collaborating, or it just gets to a point that you can't say,
Yeah.
or people don't feel like they can
It's
say
not
anything,
time to
whatever that
rework
is.
it.
Like, it could be that the actors brought it up, like, I don't buy this, you know, like, I don't buy this moment. But, like, you can't. And maybe even the writer wanted to change it, but at that point, the director was like, we already have the shot list planned, or the AD was already like, we already have this set up. Like, there's just so much in
Do
We
you
already
have
paid
30
the
grand
taxi.
to
We
redo
already-
it all?
exactly.
We already
Like,
bought the briefcase we were
yeah,
going to
like,
use.
yeah, we already rented a taxi company. Like, we can't undo this, you know, like we might as well get the shot and we'll decide later. And then it goes past the editor, and it's so easy. Like, again, it's money, you know, and like, that's another example of like lower budget. There just wasn't another set of eyes to be like, we should cut this.
They didn't have
you
time
know?
or money to rework it.
Yeah.
Because like in reality, if we didn't even have any of that lead up, if we just had the moment of Mike walking away, just them in the office and like just kind of like freaking out and him being like, oh, I said it somewhere, or we just saw Mike walk away without even losing the prototype and we didn't even have that build up, and then we just saw Jim going in by himself, we wouldn't have needed a reason. We would have been like classic tech guy just being like, fuck the business meeting. Like, I would buy that. That Mike would just be like, I don't want to be in the room yet. I'm nervous, and he walks away.
I would buy that too.
Like, I would believe that. And
you
I would
could
believe
sell that
Jim
to me all day.
Yeah, exactly. And I would believe Jim floundering in that situation.
Yeah.
Like, how does he
and
convince
Jim just being like, all right, I can buy you a minute.
Yeah,
I can buy
exactly.
You,
Yeah, and he would believe he could. And he's like, I'd buy
outside,
yeah.
He's just like listening, and he's like, oh, this guy's getting fucking just
Well-
rushed in there.
Well,
Yeah.
what was interesting too is the beginning of that scene. I think this is also why it was so cool when he goes into the room, because I thought what Jim was doing was basically trying to full on CEO the company. And I think in his head,
Maybe he was testing it.
he literally was like, can I just do this by myself? Can I be the one that basically becomes CEO and there is no co-CEO, and this could be the start of that?
Because he
you
calls
know?
himself the CEO.
Yeah, and they're like, are we waiting for someone? And he's like, no, we're not waiting for anybody. And he pitches the thing that he knows Mike is going to be pitching. And when it's thrown back in his face that he cannot do it alone, was such a eye-opening experience for him, because he genuinely thought he could at the beginning of that. And we watched him, and I was like, oh shoot, is he going to get all of these people basically somehow selling something, and he's going to separate it from, he's going to US robotics RIM even in this moment and just try to like privatize what he just sold, and the prototype's in a taxi, whatever, or like it's not there, so like he could just not prove that he did it, whatever, and so it was looking like it was going in that direction. So watching him then be shamed for not knowing what he's talking about, and then watching him realize he cannot do it alone, it was like there were so many levels to it that I was like,
There's
love it.
like such an icky feeling that goes in meetings like that too, that if you show up and you're not prepared or you can't cover it, it's like, why have you wasted all of our time?
Yeah, it's so
Like,
aggressive.
that's the vibe.
And I felt it in that scene where it was just like, you gathered us here for this.
And the closer to the C-suite, the more
Yeah.
that is
Yeah.
too.
Because everybody should be in a meeting right now, but we're not, because we're here with you.
Yeah. So like,
Which-
make it worth our time. You have 5 minutes, you
Yep.
know, and it's like, that's what it is. And then, are we waiting for anybody? No. Well, you have 4 minutes. So
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah, $5 million was the budget, so it's pretty low for a movie.
Wow.
That's
Super.
pretty
So
Yeah.
Glenn
5
didn't get paid
million.
at all, huh? He was
Yeah.
just like,
No, I
Actually-
don't think they only made 3,
Mhm.
so
Oh, bummer.
they lost a lot of money on that movie, I think.
Yeah. Well, I had never heard of it. I mean, because like, how do you? Yeah, you have to have a marketing plan for that.
The only
I-
reason I had heard of it is because I used to watch the Always Sunny podcast before that got shit canned. That's not a thing anymore. But
Brutal.
but
5 million is low
Yeah.
for a feature.
Oh, yeah.
And wow, that's so fun. That that it was. Yeah, it was there. But like, they did it for 5 million. They did a great job. Like that, they did a really good job for 5 million. Like I didn't feel like this is shittily done. Like there was no point. Like I could tell it was low budget, but I was like, I respected it for what it was doing. I wasn't like, yikes, they definitely missed this, you know?
Well, it's like what you said about like they made the low budget work.
yeah, it was an
Like,
opportunity.
yeah, they used it to complement the story
Yep.
in a lot of ways,
rather than
which
a
is so
crutch.
impressive because it's easy not to make the conversation about that.
Mm-hmm.
what an
Mhm.
interesting just situation in that you make a biopic movie about an entity like BlackBerry that used to run the world in their sector.
45%.
45% of it, and now it runs 0% of
Yeah.
it, and you can't even get people to sit down or think about a movie that has to do with it, even though all of those things literally just happen within the historical span of things. It's like that was just a thing, but now it's whatever. Like,
The level of their rise and fall is extremely dramatic and not a common story you would
Mhm.
see. Yeah, it's just like, especially for billionaires
and how quickly they
millionaires,
just
yeah.
vanished
yeah.
in that way.
overnight almost.
Like, yeah,
Yeah.
it truly was. Yeah. I mean, iPhone did their presentation and everybody was like, that's the new thing. And
Yep, you changed the world.
Mhm.
Holy shit, you did it.
Yep.
man, how long was he planning that too? Like thinking about just Steve Jobs in that presentation. And like you said earlier, he's just taking notes like, oh, this is what you're doing now. This is what you're doing. And
I bet he got slighted by Jim at some point and be like, oh, this
This motherfucker. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's just pettiness all the way down.
all the way down.
All the way
It's
down.
just pettiness all the way down.
he was
Yeah.
Callahan from the
Yeah. I can't believe they didn't get somebody to just play Steve Jobs for just a second, just like cameo somebody in there, just be like,
Ashton Kutcher.
yeah.
That made it oddly feel extra real to me. 'Cause-
Having it actually be the
Yeah.
I liked that.
I
I,
liked it
actually
too,
liked
yeah.
that.
Yeah, it's like you have to like remember that you're not like watching the real thing
Well, and just
happen
hearing
in a
how
second
people
there.
reacted in it.
Oh yeah.
You know, like
So
when I see
shiny.
those things, and like I remember watching the video where, or like I saw it recently where like Steve Jobs for the first time was like, so it's a touchscreen, and he goes like this, and everybody in the audience is like, oh my, you know, and like they're like the reaction is so intense, and it's like, yeah, that never existed, you know, and I'm trying, like, it's hard for me to imagine at 40 years old seeing that, right? I saw it at 10 years old, 12 years old, and I was like, oh, that's cool. But like, it wasn't beyond the scope of possibility because I grew up with so much change technologically. So it was like, oh, I went from, you know, small phone keyboard to QWERTY keyboard to BlackBerry to this. Like, it was within the realm of possibility in my mind. But other people seeing a touchscreen phone this big that now we can scroll up, and like he's showing scrolling up, and everybody's just like, what?
and it looks so sleek too.
And it's so clean, and it's
So
so
sleek.
seamless, and
Do
it's
you guys
just like,
remember that? Like the first this is an outdated concept, but I got an iPod Touch.
yes.
yeah,
So
yeah.
And I remember like opening it and like just sliding it. The same thing that happens on iPhones now, that you just go to the other screen. And I was just blown away. I had an
Yeah.
app that was just a Zippo lighter that you just like roll
Yeah.
the wheel with your phone and it lights. And I was like, whoa. Like,
It's
Yeah.
the beer app that
Yeah.
already was like
Yeah, just the idea. Yeah, just the touchscreen feature was so cool.
yeah,
having a
it's so
flashlight on
exciting.
your phone.
What?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
You changed the world, buddy.
It was such an exciting time.
You
was.
know what sold me the most as a child, you know, teenager situation, I was watching those commercials, is having the album covers for all of my music be actively visible all of the time.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like something so
Yep,
small
you're
like
right.
that
You're
is
right.
Do a
what really
list.
sold it to me, is like being able to just see each one of those as though it were a genuine cataloged collection. I was like, oh, that.
Not just
I
text on the
remember
screen.
Yeah.
I remember I'd go out of my way, like downloading my LimeWire music and then downloading the album cover so I would have the album
Exactly.
cover attached to the music.
My MP3 player just had like
And one
a
by one.
list
Yeah.
that you'd read, and you'd
Yep.
just like twist the like
Oh yeah,
thing to scroll
I still
down.
have my iPod. That it was like my iPod Nano from back from 8th grade or middle school or something.
That was the
before
cool kid
time.
From the
thing.
before
Yeah.
times.
When I was in middle school, that's what the cool kids had, was the little tiny like stick of an iPod.
Yeah,
I wanted one really, but it was
Oh.
not in the budget.
I
Yeah.
know everybody wanted one.
Those
I mean,
things were-
shoot,
They were fun colors.
yeah. Oh, wild. Well,
Do we have any more nitpicks?
no, that was my big one. Was I was really irritated by.
We should go around though, like what's not good about the movie before we rate.
Well, kind of. I mean,
feel like-
I did
yeah.
mine a little bit. I just
Yeah, I
was
touched
talking
on
about the fact that it tries to go both lanes in terms of like whose biopic is this? Is it BlackBerries or is it the people who it's because of the second half of the movie, Jim's hardly in it. You know, it's like Jim's aura is what's there, and now it's being mantled by Mike, and he can't rudder that ship all that well. So he like
Yeah.
crashes
Rudderless.
But if I was to
He doesn't know how to
yeah.
drive a
Yeah, he
rudderless
doesn't know how to
ship.
rudder.
If I was to
Ooh.
break down the screenplay though, it's definitely like Jim is our protagonist, and it made so much sense as we were going through, because also the first full face we see is Jim's. I'm pretty sure at the beginning, like we see Mike and we see Doug, but we don't see like full front face of either of those, if I'm not mistaken. I think we see Jim's full front face first.
Full frontal face.
Full frontal
They
face.
get to the parking
full
lot.
of
Jim and Mike get
FF.
to the parking lot first.
FFF.
And they're like, no, because they're like inside the car first. They're like, because they're like trying to
Were
hype.
they?
They're like trying to hype themselves up for their pitch.
Oh, Mike and Doug.
Yeah, and then they open the door, and as they're opening the door,
What was
that's
the
when
first
the
shot?
BMW goes into the.
Mhm.
Oh, yeah.
I don't remember the first shot.
Yeah, I think he's describing.
Yeah, but again, no, I mean like full frontal face. I'm F
Oh, you mean
cubed.
like that?
No, like
oh,
it's
that
a
would
very
be-
different thing when you see like sides of faces in a film versus like the full front. And again, it's
Full
not
frontal face frame.
Yeah.
Is that still not Mike though? Because he was looking at the voice recorder, getting that white noise hiss.
Yep.
And as he was doing that, that's when the whole like, let me fix it before anybody
Yeah,
gets
but we
here.
were still seeing Jim interact with the other guy too, and it's not a full like
It's not full
you
frontal.
don't well, but you don't have to. It's not a recipe of like, oh, the protagonist of the film is the first person you see their full face of by any means.
They're co-protagonists.
But it's
It
just
does
like
set
the
stage.
it's certain things, and I didn't realize until later because it was so mixed, and I assumed it was going to be the original maker of BlackBerry to be the protagonist. Like that's what I went in assuming, and then it was about halfway through that I was like, no, the protagonist is Jim. Like we are watching the rise and fall of Jim.
He's a more interesting character.
He is, yeah. It's just that was I kind of agree with you in the sense of it. I liked that they were the co-CEO theme was so throughout it. It would have, I don't know, there maybe was opportunity in focusing or just like honing in a little bit that like this is our protag. I'm not sure. There might have been, but I'm not positive on that. But it's making me think of that a little bit.
What did you dislike about the movie? What section did you dislike the most? And it can't be the taxi scene.
We went into that one. Sorry.
I mean, I think I agree with you guys. I think that they did a lot of like, and this isn't fully like baked in my mind yet. So I don't know if this is like necessarily a bad thing. I feel like they half introduced a lot of noise. Partway, like halfway and forward into the movie. Like I don't understand some of the stuff that was brought in with like, buying the teams. I don't fully understand what he was doing other than this like vague implication that he was like out doing something else and wasn't present. And then, but maybe it's like to showcase the chaos and the absence. I don't know. But there was stuff going on in the company too. Like just bringing in this other guy to like yell at engineers. And I don't know. I just felt like there started to be a lot going on that didn't like all fit together in my head. And I don't like leaving a movie feeling like I didn't understand what was going on, but maybe everybody else does.
Or maybe we didn't
like,
see the end of that. Like we didn't see the through line of those small narratives coming in. I agree with that. That they were like introduced, but we didn't actually see the culmination or completion of any of them.
Like they didn't get their proper time. Like bringing in someone to yell at your engineers, like you just introduce a whole other story.
Yeah.
Like there's much, and they warned us about it too. Like they put weight on it at the beginning. Yeah, and then it just kind of like fizzled out and never turned into anything or went anywhere.
Underutilizing Michael Ironsides.
Yeah, 1000%.
Yeah. So like I think there were just some of that like just left me a little bit with like a confused and unresolved kind of feeling on some stuff.
I agree
like
with that. They almost were like unnecessary with the way that the story went, because I think that narrative was meant to show, the people working for us are maybe going to end up being unsatisfied or quitting or whatever, but we never saw that actually happen.
They teased that like 4 or 5 times.
They did, for no reason.
You're 100% right, because I remember as I was watching the movie thinking either Prozed character is going or the other one is going to be the one who starts whistleblowing, being like, hey, I wanted to leave the company because X, Y, and Z thing happened and I'm trying to like liquidate my shares and I can't because they're conflicting with this other guy's contract. And, like that would be the thing that slowly but surely like gets them to have the SEC on their back, because that just seems to come out of nowhere, you know? At least, I mean, like, I understand that, that happened in real life, but at the same time, relative to the movie's narrative, it just feels like it
shoehorned a little.
Yeah, exactly.
It did kind of it was another, like, throw it in the plot versus, like you had mentioned earlier, if Doug was the one that in that conversation when the SEC called said something, because he was dissatisfied, that would have been a character pushing forward that moment.
Or Doug again being the comedic sense of relief with the only good shoulders on his head, being like, "Hey, I'll give you Jim, but Mike was just
you leave Mike alone.
You leave Mike alone." Yeah, exactly. He just got caught up with this whole nonsense with this guy, but I can get you the main guy who started this whole situation.
That brings me back to that moment when we saw him on the phone and the subtitles were different from what he said.
Yeah.
That still like sits with me because the only reason, so like again, someone in the editing room, right, makes those subtitles. Like somebody yes, now we have AI that can generate them on their own. But again, IA wouldn't have generated a word that wasn't said. So someone wrote in not, or the original script said not when he said like, oh, well, I have you as one of the original founders. And he's like, I suppose I am, is what he said. But the subtitle said, I am not. And I was like, so that means it was written not. And the actor said am. And I think it's very important that he said not, because the following scene, we see or 2 scenes later, we see his sign, his parking sign being taken down, So it was like very significant. And in that moment where they're being inquired or like they're being asked by the SEC, right? And he's like, him saying, I suppose I am not, means a lot, because then he sells all his shares at that moment of peak. So it's almost like that is the moment that makes him realize I need to get the fuck out of this company. And it says a lot for him using the word I am not a co-founder in this company.
What makes this even stranger is that guy, the guy that plays Doug, is the director of the movie and one of the co-writers. So he chose in that moment
Interesting.
to ad-lib.
And he kept it,
Yeah.
but he kept the original writing. That's so interesting. Or it was a flub and it was thrown into the subtitle accidentally.
I thought it was,
but that seems harder to do.
when she mentioned that originally, I thought that the movie was trying to go for like that Jim's trying to do some revisionism to the history of the company, where it was like, oh, it was just Jim.
Right, it was just me.
It was just
and maybe
Mike.
Mike.
Yeah. And Mike thought about stuff every once in a while. Yeah.
Mike showed up, and that was about it. Okay,
It's
I did the work.
interesting though, because I wonder if it was like a realization of like the first time hearing it back, because no one's treated him like a co-founder,
Oh.
Yeah.
hearing it back
That's a
and
fair
being
point.
like, oh, at this point, this isn't something that I want to be a founder of. This isn't what I came here to build.
But I really agree with what you were saying earlier about the kind of the introduction of sub stories that weren't seen through. I was disappointed not seeing the follow through with him buying the NHL stuff, because I thought it was going to be another example of him being like, just going full capitalism, and just being like, I need to win and I'm going to do this. And now being an owner of an NFL team, that's a thing, and that's how a lot of people make a shit ton of money in their life. So it was like him going from, CFO or whatever he was at that first company he got fired from to co-CEO to CEO to now an owner of an NFL team. NHL team, I don't know. And
It's
I'm
hockey.
super fluent on my as the owner of
sport
but the
acronyms.
owner of a sports team. It's like there's just watching him win capitalism essentially. But yeah, not seeing that through, or watching him, get it taken away because he was bragging to other people. I don't know. It was just a little bit like far-fetched.
He said the quiet part out loud. Even although those other C-suite psychopaths said, it's like there's one thing to try to fuck all of us. It's another to openly brag about it before you even finish it.
But we never saw him do that. That's what I found hard.
That's
is
another
we never,
unfortunate. It's another unfortunate.
But
aspect
we
of the
never saw him
movie.
do that
Yeah.
ever. Like I never felt like the way he saved face. Right? I never saw him bragging to people about
Well,
something that he
was the whole
doing.
montage, wasn't it? Like the whole montage of him like sitting on the table and waving that guy over for like the lunch. That was supposed to be the insinuation of the fact that this was when they were riding high and he was just pretty much shaking his ass in front of everybody's
but we
face.
never saw him as a character, Jim,
Of course,
bragging about like what he was actually going to do. Like we saw him talk about what he was going to do, but we never saw him be like, this is what I'm doing in my business meeting, and now I'm going to go talk to Mike about this is how I'm going to actually fuck what I just said, blah, blah, blah. Like, I'm actually going to get one over on them doing this. Like, it was never that.
I know. It was more insinuating and not even telling.
Yeah.
It's actually irritating to me because they framed him up to be a character that knows when to stop talking.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And like I felt like they laid that foundation
you're right.
firmly.
You're absolutely right.
Because he was teaching Mike when to stop talking.
Yes.
And also he did that thing where he leaves people wanting more ignore a lot.
He did. He was great at it. You're so right.
But
so
maybe,
it just wasn't believable.
But maybe that's the showcase, and the movie does it sloppily. But maybe what they were trying to showcase in that scene with the was the fact that it was the crack in his mask. Like he got angry in public, which is something that he actively tries not to do. He tries to make all of that seething pretty much make his face shrivel into hardness, but in that point he's like, what the fuck, like,
totally slipped.
All of you,
hostile takeover.
Definitely a little bit of a forced downfall in that moment, though, because I could believe him losing face at some point, and we watch it happen, and so there was something satisfying in that. But another part of me was like, oh, why now though?
It's like he fell, like he lost because he misses like Mike's characteristics that are good. It's like they both needed to be together, which I think frames it into a story that doesn't really feel like a biopic. And more of
Buddy
like a
thing or something.
What is a story
the
of
dynamic
two brothers.
duo. The dynamic duo component was great.
Yeah,
I
like they
that
both
aspect
fell
of it.
apart separately, and I feel like that's what, like, they were all kind of tying it back to that. Is my best guess on that.
I mean, the movie never shies away from showcasing the limitations of that ego, right? It's like, just because he goes in hot to those meetings doesn't mean that he's the reason why the meetings go well. Hardly ever he's the reason why the meetings go well.
Yeah,
he can set the base, he can set the tone, but for the most part, again, it's this Dunning-Kruger situation that he's got going on, where he really believes that he is, if not at least one of the smartest people in the room, and he handles himself as such, even though it's not true a lot of the time, like at least in the subject matter that matters at that moment in time. But at the same time, because of the mask, like, this is the face that you're going to see, the face of confidence. You don't like it? Fuck you, because I'm not changing it, And yeah, I mean, I don't know. The philosophical consistency of those kind of people really does make you want to root for them, even though you know that they're bad people, which is kind of sad, because who knows how often that happens in real life, where people like that are valorized because of the fact that they're willing to eat shit, when other people aren't, because other people are too meek or they know their limits.
People follow confident people.
Mm-hmm.
There's something too about, like, he brought something to the table that they didn't have.
Yep.
1000%.
We see it in the first right away. We're like, oh yeah.
Well, and even in the end of it, like, it foreshadowed itself. He told Mike at the beginning, he was like, let me tell you, the best advice I ever got in Harvard is you have to make sacrifices. And he kind of, like, the company I think many reasons contributed to the company falling, basically. But that was like the showcasing of it, is that he wouldn't sacrifice this thing that he made. He wouldn't give it up.
Yeah. And it left them exactly right back where he started, which is just back to basics of checking every phone and checking every item that he was trying to sell, because
What do you
I don't know, he cared about pride again, essentially, and like the pride of his work.
Well, he was chasing perfection. Yeah. Or he was, that's what he didn't want to settle for good enough.
Which is really unfortunate too, because when thinking about that, when he's holding the new BlackBerry, all things considered, it doesn't look like a bad phone. It's got the same kind of app situation and everything. It just runs horribly. Like, the internal quality of it was rotted. So because of that, there was no means of being able to sell it anymore in that way.
Yeah, well, it's like one of those, as soon as you get caught in that vicious cycle that you're like, we're behind, we have to make sacrifices to something in order to catch up. Quality or money are the only things that you can throw at it, and that's going to hurt you in another way.
And yeah, also how illusory satisfaction is in an industry like that, because like the moment they get big, they're like, we're going to do a corporate takeover of your company, because now you're actually a competitor. So it's time to get eaten, Before you were a microscopic creature, now you're one of the fish,
Mm-hmm.
There's always a bigger fish.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And we're worried that you're getting big.
Yeah,
fast.
exactly. Yeah, take this. Yeah, if anything, take this from one psychopath to another, right? Like, take this as a compliment. Like, we're afraid of you. Like, we genuinely do believe that you could do something to us, so we're going to kill you before you have a moment and the ability to do anything about it. And that's why he was so Jim was so okay with just being like, yeah, we'll take your deal, Palm Pilot guy, give us a couple months to be able to, get it all sorted out,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
And that guy was probably riding so high in his arrogance, his own,
Yeah.
his
he
own narcissism and
believed, yeah.
psychopathy that he's like, oh, I got those guys. Woo! You know what I mean? Like,
Oh yeah, he was texting him names. What do you think of this
Mhm,
name for
yeah.
the company? Like,
Yeah.
what?
mm-hmm.
So mean.
But everybody fails upward, right? Because as the movie goes on, that dude ends up the CEO of one of the companies, right? So it's like, that's another issue, I guess, with these kind of movies and the reality that we live in general
Yeah.
is just the fact that like reality doesn't provide consequences to these kind of actions. So because of that, even the mythos that we throw down, from a narrative perspective can't follow that either because it's not the truth, It's like if you're trying, because at that point you're just trying to moralize the story as opposed to tell it as it is, right? Which is one of the desires of a biopic-esque situation like this, right? So yeah, it's really difficult to try to tell a moral in a modern sense because morality loses in that way.
Yeah, Jim's just off fishing with his buddy.
Yeah,
The
exactly.
movie, like not worse.
Yeah,
off
what did
as
he
far as we
lose?
can
Stress.
tell,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, he lost his hair, and that was about it.
Oh, he lost that before the
Yeah,
movie
way
even
before.
started.
Yeah, the anger.
He had
ate
nothing to lose.
all of
If I was that bald, I'd also have nothing to
Yeah,
lose.
fuck it. We ball.
Yeah.
Let's go.
Mhm. Kidding me? I got a cul-de-sac that I'm not willing to shave. And like,
Seriously. I don't know why anybody hangs on to that.
because
Jeez.
it's his projection of himself. It's like, this is who I am. This is what I sell to the world, and they better fucking like it.
They will. How could they not?
Mm-hmm.
That's
How could they
like-
not?
how
I
could
wear.
they
I
not
drive
like
a
it?
BMW. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I liked it. Ratings around the room. Hannah, start.
Yeah, we
Out of
do
5.
ones
Out
out
of
of
5.
Out
5.
of 5?
Yeah.
Oh.
And you can only break out a 6-star every once in a while.
I would never.
only in horror.
If you said it goes to 5,
No,
it
I
goes to
don't.
5.
I fight every time someone tries to break out a 6
Yeah, it
star.
only goes to 5. Why aren't we doing out of 10?
I know we've always
5
just
is
done
tough.
We do up to 5s, but
Robert
we do
Ebert
0.5s,
did-
so it
Roger
kind of
Ebert,
is up to 10.
Was that what his name was?
They had thumbs.
I thought
Right.
he did. I thought he did stars.
Well, when it was Siskel and Ebert, before Siskel died, they always did thumbs. So it was either 2 thumbs up if they each gave a thumb up, or it was like a thumb up and a thumbs down, or
Yeah.
it was 2 thumbs.
That's tough. In acting school, my teacher always said it's either there's good work and there's needs work. That's pretty-
Ooh.
Yeah, and I
Sounds like your instructors from Whiplash.
actually what's really funny about that is you are not far off because like the character that played the teacher in Whiplash is the same character that my teacher in grad school, or the same actor my teacher in grad school would like be considered for the same roles for. Like they're literally considered for the
J.K.
J.K.
Simmons?
Simmons and the director of the program at USC were often looked at for the same roles. Like they have a very similar quality.
Oh, badass.
Yeah. No, I mean, grad school was hard, really traumatic time.
I was just
really
gonna say,
appreciated
do you need
his
a
teachings,
hug?
of course. But yeah, no, I mean, it was not an easy process.
My tempo, Lindsay. My
Yeah.
tempo.
It was I saw Whiplash.
Watch me.
I saw Whiplash my
Throw a chair at
first year of grad school, and I was like, and when people would be like, "What is grad school like?" and I was like, "Have you seen Whiplash?" and they'd say yes or no, and I'm like, "Well, it's like that movie." Except I don't get chairs thrown at me, but I mean, pretty much everything else is there.
There is something to like creative
Shit
schooling.
got thrown, so
I feel like you go into creative schooling feeling like it's going to be like a fun, chill thing. But like, I did 1 year of studio art and I was like, you know what? No.
not for me.
it's brutal.
Especially professors that have like made their livelihood like that.
Oh yeah.
Like, I remember one time I was in a wheel thrown ceramics class and I was like throwing a bowl. And my professor was like hunched over me, yelling at me.
yeah. yeah. Where are your fingers? Where is your placement? What are you doing?
Well, because like you always want to be like, it's bullshit. I'm out of here. And she was like, keep pulling it.
Yeah.
Like,
Only thing I see here is bullshit. All right.
She was like, it's gonna be a big deep bowl.
No, art school, that could be its own. If we ever want to get into
my
an
God.
actual podcast about art school, I could probably talk a lot about it because there's so much to go in on.
Is there a movie that we can use as a jumping off point? Because we already did Whiplash, unfortunately.
Oh, yeah.
Whiplash is, I think, a really good version of, like, I don't know if you could do better than that.
I mean, it's definitely. I'd have to think about it. Nothing comes to mind at the top of my head other than, but because I saw Whiplash and I was like, wow, this is too close. And then what's crazy is the pandemic happened and so much shifted at the School of Dramatic Arts and at USC that when people came back after the pandemic, and I came back, after my year away, right, and my deferment for a year, being like, okay, I'm ready. Torture me, like I'm ready for this, like. Put me against the wall and throw everything you can. I was like ready. And everybody was so nice. Like it went like from freaking R ratings to like PG overnight. And everybody was like, oh, do you feel safe? Do you feel this? And I was like, where was this my first year? Like you guys traumatized me my first year. I came back like ready to go.
Where's
like
the grit?
Yeah, I was ready for it then. And I was like, I'm ready to suffer for my art now.
Yeah, I thought this was Navy SEALs.
Yeah, and everybody was like
boot camp.
babying it. And I was like, what is going on? So it was crazy to have that experience too, where I hardened myself, but also was like totally like took off the armor to like actually expose myself to the work.
Did you guys also do class peer reviews?
We did
Where
more than
everybody
that.
criticizes?
We had my first year and my second year, 3 days a week. For 3 hours a day, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, a talking circle essentially, and that was our voice class. And it was essentially totally uncertified therapy, group therapy, and like
actors helping actors. Yeah.
And I will say, people
Great
brought
idea.
up everything, and it was what's going on in our lives. What happened this week? What did that person do? What happened in this? Like everything was talked about. Nothing was off limits. We would get into stuff for sure. And it was one conversation I had with another person in my cohort, and she was like the second oldest in our cohort. So she was probably the best actor in our cohort. She was exceptional. And she was like, and this was technically voice class, and she was like, I think I figured out what's happening in this, because our teacher for voice class like stirred the pot. Like she liked when we would get like worked up or like get to places of being triggered or like trauma or whatever it was. Like that's she would get us there.
She worked for TLC.
She would get us there too with each other. Like, okay, so what bothered
have
you
a
about what
drink.
Lindsey did? Like what did Lindsey do with that? She wanted that. And Anna was like, I think she's trying to get us to these spaces, and she listens to us talk for all these hours to hear what our natural voice sounds like. Because then when we're acting and we change our voice patterns and our speech patterns, and we go to a different place in our voice when I'm acting, and all of a sudden I'm acting up here, right? But like naturally I'm talking to you like this. She's able to identify and be like, where's your voice? Like drop in. You're not dropped in, right? And when I saw that, I was like, oh my God, that's totally what she's doing. Like she's seeing what our voice sounds like when we're in duress. So then when we're in a character that's in duress,
She wants to know it sounds right.
that sounds authentic. Like you're doing the work right now.
Yeah.
Like you are dropped in. And so I was like, this is crazy toxic. But like
But
also
it sounds like master level work.
but
I mean,
that's the thing. She is a
Sounds like
master
master's level
teacher.
work,
She
yeah.
literally is like the only teacher left that has learned from like how a lot of high level creative work, how it goes is they learn from masters, right? And they learn from like the techniques that those masters have invented. And then those teachers then are certified of that technique that they learned from that person. So like that teacher that I'm referring to learned from Kristen Linklater, who like is known for the Linklater voice technique, right? And she and my teacher is one of the like, I think she's the only teacher left in the world that is like that learned from
that's
Kristen Linklater. Yeah, like so she is literally a master in voice. And like So like, what do you do? But be like, thanks for your knowledge, torture away,
Right.
Thank
Yeah.
you. Can I have another?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
May I have some more?
I mean, getting
please?
better at stuff is hard. You go there prepared to make that journey, or you don't go.
Well, and I didn't know that was the journey. I went in being like, 23 years old, acting school will be fun. I'm going to learn how to act, And
I
so-
did the same thing with art school, but I walked out learning how to take feedback.
Nice.
Like a champ.
Nice.
It has benefited me in many other areas.
Yeah, definitely. That's a good thing.
I mean, those are the transcendental qualities you want out of those things, right?
Yeah.
I mean, especially because just like that voice acting situation, at least now I would imagine that breaks the subconscious inability some people have knowing when they're falling into a role in their own life of
Yeah.
like
The
either
awareness.
victimhood or, faux assertiveness.
Mm.
Like trying to be domineering, but you don't see yourself as domineering. You're just like, I'm just trying to make a point, and I'm like, this is just how I make a point.
Mhm.
Or for women, don't raise your voice when you're like, trying to convince somebody of something
Mhm.
or reasoning or bargaining with something that's like something a lot of us do
Mhm.
naturally. That's like been
Mhm.
ingrained and learned through
Yep.
habits of other people.
Like raising pitch. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm. Mhm.
I wonder if they teach that kind of stuff in an MBA program, like the one Jim probably went to in Harvard. Just because it's all mostly just teaching you how to play the role, right, of somebody who is a master in business administration.
Mhm. And how many of his teachers were like, fuck what you guys think. I want your paper on my desk on Friday, and like modeling the business that they see in the world, and the successful business people were modeled by their own professors. I don't know. I've never done an MBA, but
Yeah,
it'd be
exactly.
interesting.
Because I would imagine, right, that nobody is the villain inside of their own story in that way.
never
So the
are, yeah.
professors are actively being like, these are the sharks that are out there. I'm trying to teach you how to harpoon them before they harpoon you. And the only way to do so is to get bit in a safe environment, and I'm going to keep doing that. I'm going to keep taking bites off of you all of the time
That's
until it's
exactly what grad school
until your
felt
heart
like,
is
yeah.
bone.
That's
All you
actually-
are is just a skeleton.
That is, I'm not gonna lie, that is exactly what it felt
Skeleton
like. Yeah.
Yeah, skeleton shark. We'll never see that coming.
Yeah.
The next niche of corporal evolution, right? It's just like taking, the environment requires certain things, and also just the clashing of like how, because the new tech guys, right, we're all genuine nerds who just liked hanging out with each other and just getting these eureka moments when they could, and having to clash with the fact that they were now the powerhouses of monetary, gain against the old guard of Jim's way of being. Like, no, everybody needs to be wearing a suit, and everybody, we all need to be real, dickheads with each other all of the time.
That's a whole other story arc that it introduced that I didn't feel like it like leaned into as
Mhm.
well. Like these things are all cans of worms, I think.
Yeah, you only got 2 hours, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll pick a lane and stay out of the
Pick a
other
lane,
ones.
Oh, shit. So how does that impact where you at on the
Yeah.
How did Lindsey's experience in grad school impact
impact this
Oh,
movies?
dear.
Lindsay's
Dear.
experience in grad school has triggered me.
Oh my gosh. Same.
Show us your voice.
Same. Yeah, exactly.
No, I could
Start to
not.
cry. Cry
Yeah,
now.
I don't.
Curl up in a ball.
I will give my rating, but
Yes.
just as like an aside, my brother was in like serious college theater, and an audition for a performance sounds like my nightmare. His first audition, he just got asked to sing and dance. And when he went up on the stage, I was like, I would just walk right back out. Like,
Walk up and walk back down the stage.
absolutely not. Anyway, I think that this is hard because I feel like I'm still thinking about it, but I'm tempted to give this like a 3.5. And I wanted to give it a 4 earlier, and now I'm like leaning more towards a 3. And I wanted to give it a 4 because I enjoyed this movie so much, and I try to put a lot of weight on my experience
Mhm.
with the movie. And I feel like there are many things that were unique about it, and I had a great time watching it, and I felt the tension and I felt the excitement. But just kind of talking through a bunch of different stuff, there's a good percentage of it that doesn't feel very sophisticated to me, or like crystal clear and like just like when something has been worked on so hard and so well that it just like makes so much sense, and everything else is like I'm trying to understand it, and then it clicks, and I'm like, oh yes, this was above me when I was experiencing it. Part of it feels like it didn't get to that point of like done where it's really, really good. But I want to attribute like all of my like 3.5 to the performances. Because I think I agree with Lindsey. I think the actors carried the hell out of this movie.
That was something I thought of earlier too. I wondered actually how much of the dialogue was improvised. I had that thought earlier, and I wanted to throw that out there, but we shifted in a different direction. But you just reminded me that it was like, because I thought the dialogue was really good, but it also felt so natural, and the actors were doing such a good job that I did wonder. I wonder for several scenes how much of that was kind of improvised, and it would make a lot of sense to me that there were a number of scenes that like, because of the overlapping, so the way that they overlapped each other, the way that there were repetitive words, like, so the fuck you, fuck, no, I'm not talking about it. I'm not doing it. Like that type of energy.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, is not overtly written on a script almost ever. Like that is actor improvisation, and it makes me think that there was some of that in there.
I would imagine with a lower budget comes more free reign to,
which can be great if you have great actors.
Right, exactly. It's like I'm already doing this pro bono practically. Like this is a passion project.
Because improv is very difficult to get like a real story happening on a page with improv. I mean, it's like
it's moment by moment.
Yeah, and like so.
Yeah, to echo a lot of what you said, I think most of my rating goes towards Glenn and everybody else. Even though they didn't give enough screen time to Michael Ironside. That's fine. It's fine. I'll get over it.
Unbelievable.
Doesn't sound like
it's just so upsetting because I love seeing that guy, and he shows up again in a movie. I haven't seen him in a movie in maybe a decade. And there he is. Anyway,
it's a bummer when you get excited and then it gets taken
and then
from you.
And then there's just nothing there. I like the cameos. I thought the pacing was pretty good. It bummed me out that the comedy didn't last the whole movie. I understand that like there's sort of the serious like end of the tone of the end of the arc needs that tone a little bit, but man, there's just like, I don't know if you guys have noticed this, but there is like a severe drought in comedy in film in like the past couple of years. Like the time of Judd Apatow is long gone. The time of like 40-year-old virgin. Yeah.
The thinker pose showing up.
And it's kind of a bummer. It was nice. I really value good comedy in film, and this one had it, at least in the first 2/3. But I'm probably leaning more towards like 2.5 stars. I might be convinced to bump it up to a 3, but all of it would go to Glenn and everybody else on the cast for driving the thing. Otherwise, I don't think it would have done nearly as well. This is like Heath Ledger is the Joker kind of casting. Like Glenn is, I don't think you could get a better character for this person than Glenn. So yeah, he fucking nailed it. 2.5. That's where I'm landing now. Average. It was fine. I probably wouldn't watch it again.
I hope to see
I might
Glenn.
recommend it.
Yeah, I hope to see Glenn Howerton in more things.
Yeah,
I'm really excited by him breaking into other things as an actor, and I think he absolutely has the chops.
For sure he does. Yeah.
And I would love to support anything he wants to be in and gets to be in.
True that.
Yeah, my rating from 1 to 5 is a little tough for me. My instinct was, 3, or like, but I mean, I don't know. It's hard because I'm trying to think of what would be a 1 and a 2 for me. And like if a 5 for me is like a movie like Parasite, and going back to what you had said, Hannah, where for me, a really good movie is where all the pieces come together to tell a very specific story. And like the word specific is at the forefront of like a great movie for me is when it's specific and like the vision of the film is clear. Even if I'm like, even if I walk away and I'm like, I don't agree with that director, writer, entire piece, if I don't agree with that point of view, at least I know what that point of view is. And I find that in like great art in general, like a great book, I walk away being like, I know how the author views the world because it was so clear in their writing and their vision was so clear. So that for me is like a great movie. And I do think this movie had vision. I don't think it was refined to the extent that it would take for me to give like high marks, but it's also not, you know, it wasn't a movie that was for, you know, pure entertainment. And like, that's also tough too, because I have a distinction between, you know, there are good movies that I like and there are bad movies that I like. And there are, you know, good movies that I don't like and bad movies that I don't like. And like this for me is a good movie that I also liked, but that doesn't make it like, or it was a good movie on like the general scale. Was it a great movie, you know, and was it, you know, no, but was it a bad movie? Like there's, you know, that's me going to like Now You See Me Too, you know, that's like purely, right, exactly, pure entertainment. It's like not actually meant to be a good movie. And like, but then I think of other bad movies that are pure entertainment that I'm like, I love it, you know, and like I would watch, and I've watched it a bunch of times because I love an entertaining movie isn't a bad thing. This movie I don't think was meant to entertain. I mean, obviously it is to some extent, but like that wasn't the root of it. It was meant to strive for like goodness. And I think it did. Like I was in it. I was definitely in it and I was taken by it. And I do think it utilized a lot of struggles in its creation as opportunities rather than like throwing them aside. So like, that's why for me, especially considering the budget, considering who they were able to get signed on for those actors, like the fact that the writer director was in it as well, you know, like, you know, there's a lot of things that show me this was a passion project, and I think they really executed a passion project actually quite well, you know. And I'm guessing it's not that writer director's like 10th film. Like it feels like it's maybe their second or third, and I would say that that's pretty great for a second or third film. So, yeah, I guess 3. Sorry, that was an extremely long explanation. No. Let me give you 3 reasons why.
We expect to know why.
You explained yourself really, really well, and you know, helped sanitize my thoughts as to where I land on them too. Just because,
you know, I like that as a phrase. You're sanitizing my thinking.
Yeah, because they're murky.
I like it as the fly
because they're genuinely murky right now because the movie teeters such a line of good, just good. You know,
that was good.
It was like,
it was fine.
Like, what's mediocrity look like in this sense? You know, like, because it isn't that, but it's certainly at the same time not exactly being exceptional in any particular thing that it does, aside from certain scenes and you know, and performances by the actors, right? I, you know, having been the person who chose the movie to watch it, I feel a certain bias toward it in relation to how the quality of the time that we spent to view it. And all in all, I do feel like I walked away understanding myself a little bit better, understanding the world a little bit better relative to the eyes that we were seeing things from, and feeling a solid amount of sympathy for people who are, for the most part, antagonists of our world, you know, like genuine type A shark, you know, C-suite psychos that for the most part, I mean, I as a layman individual don't really have any usual positive anecdotes about people like that, you know, and the movie doesn't shy away from the fact that they're all assholes, but at the same time, it at least shows you the kind of pressures that even if they're self-inflicted, they're under, that drives them to do such do or die maneuvers all of the time. And how unbelievably in it they are, because holy shit, I would not mortgage my own home to fund the payroll of some dude's company that I literally just said yes to taking over yesterday, you know?
There's no contract.
Like, exactly. It's just like, this was all just word, like, you know, me giving my word to these guys. But yeah, and even in that sense of showcasing the fact that Jim's so into his own persona that he's like, I won't let this, you know, even though you could see it Glenn does such a good job of showcasing the fact that he's like, man, what did I get myself into? Like, this is such a bad idea, but he was already so caught up in it, and now he is part of it that he can't let it die because that wouldn't be in his character. Those are those kind of personages and mindscapes are something that I don't really look for in my media, so I don't really get to delve inside of those minds too often. So whenever there's an opportunity for a really quality perception application of them, I really enjoy them. I don't like the fact that a lot of the tech people just felt like a trope of the 90s version of what they assume a nerd is, even though there might be some quite genuine veracity to their depiction. It just still felt very tropey to me, the way a lot of
there's an element to that.
A lot of
sure.
And a lot of their
movie night and
Star
Wars and
yeah, exactly. Everything was very two-dimensional until they started melding the whole co-CEO situation aspect of becoming a whole being after the fact. So yeah, I also landed about a 3. I think that this movie could have been better if they chose to just have Jim be the main character or have Mike be the main character, but providing them both with essentially an hour to grow or showcase why they're going to stagnate in the way that they're being wasn't enough time.
Or if that was their approach from the get-go, like if the writer director spent a lot of time trying to be like, how do I, like, let me play with the idea of having 2 protags in a film, like truly, that would be a really interesting thing to try to approach. And maybe that's what he was kind of dancing with a little bit, because we do see one character change, and we see the other character not change. There's something really interesting about watching that. And I do think there's potential in how that could have been done in a clearer, really specific way that would have been like, oh, the vision, the thing I'm really taking away from this film is like 2 different people following different paths as humans and like coming out the same / different. And that is interesting. Like them as they weren't even foils. That's what's so interesting. Like them just as characters side by side in this film, I liked that a lot. But I agree with you that it lacked clarity from a standard film perspective, where it's like, this is our protagonist and this is and then we walk away feeling a certain way because we're watching this person go through this way, and that's interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry.
Yeah. So rudderless, I mean, there was a lot of solid meta and narrative incorporations toward everything, but at the same time, I don't know if they're intentional. It's like, how much credit how much of this am I just gleaning because I am really good at pattern recognition in that way, right? It's like, so without being able to do that, I would also have to just land at about a 3 because there wasn't anything more exceptional than Glenn's performance. And that's a shame.
He was so good.
And that's a shame,
He was really good.
Yeah.
He'll definitely be in more from this. Like he was.
I sure hope so.
I certainly didn't feel like I wasted my time though.
No, I agree.
No, I enjoyed myself. I really did.
If I felt like it was a waste of time, bad movie, I would easily be able to be like,
I would have,
but it's not bad.
Yeah.
It's not bad. It's just hard because 4 and 5 would live in a different place in my head.
Yeah, it would have been, I mean, honestly, whenever the movie's bad, it's a even sweeter episode just because there's so many clashes of what that quality even means that brings it down like that.
Thinking of the tomato meter that it has, because it's at like a 97% of Rotten Tomatoes.
For critic score or audience score?
That was just the one that pulled up when I Googled the film, so I'm not sure.
That would be critic score then. Probably.
Okay, yeah, and
it's an important differentiator.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I assumed I think it was critic score. I wasn't going from an audience because I would put it at like, again, it's hard because I know other tomato ratings. So, but she'd be at like an 80 from a tomato rating standpoint because of where I put other movies on that, how they're rated. You know what I mean? Like, it's like anything that's actually good, like a good movie is above a 75 on like tomato ratings.
Yeah,
generally
one
speaking.
shouldn't probably
Generally, yeah.
I look at tomato ratings the most for like horror movies.
Yeah.
And if it's below and I set my threshold low because horror movies are really hard to do and there's not very many good ones and I do want to watch some, but like I don't even watch anything that comes in below like a 60% audience score because like 50% is not a good movie, I don't think.
Usually 97 for critics, 94 for audience.
It was enjoyable. I mean, I
Why
started
doesn't the box office agree?
Right. I started the conversation being like, and I think it's hard because as we go further in the conversation, we're able to nitpick the things that were like, oh yeah, this didn't work, this didn't work, this didn't work. But when I was watching it, I wasn't like, they weren't glaring to me.
Yeah.
Like they weren't like, I am distracted from the film because of these mistakes or whatever, opportunity, whatever. Like that didn't happen. And that's why if I saw that in the theater, I would walk away being like, yeah, thumbs up, and that's what I feel like a lot of tomato ratings. It's like if the audience is a thumbs up, it's like above an 80. If it's a thumbs down, it's below a 50. Like it's like there's really the 50 to 70 range is tough on tomato ratings.
Yeah.
Letterboxd has it at 3.8. I feel like I'm starting out of 5.
Okay.
Which feels better to me, like enjoyable,
Yeah.
I'm starting to lean on that a little bit more because it's like a bunch of people who watch movies as a hobby who
I can
review
see
them.
that. Yeah.
It's just like an app where you can track your movies that you've watched and like you can rate them and then bullshit with other.
And Letterboxd did not sponsor this video.
Not yet.
Not yet.
Stay tuned.
Hit us up, Letterboxd.
Okay.
Yeah, there's something to be said about getting the opportunity to speak for 2 hours and 15 minutes about
damn,
a
that's a
2-hour
wrap.
movie,
I will
and
talk.
trying to figure out what are the pros and cons of it are. Because I walked away from the movie when I first stopped watching it about a 3.5. The more we talked about it, the lower in quality it went.
It always goes one way or the other for me during the podcast.
Yeah, there's usually like a point the movie,
Except
like a
Naked
movie
Lunch.
makes that I like cling on to so hard that I'm like, oh,
I didn't think
superlative,
we'd be
you know,
able to
like,
talk
that
about
is-
it as long as we did, though. So that's a sign of goodness that we were able to talk about it as long as we did, because generally I feel like if you can't talk about it for an hour, I mean, then it's probably struggling, like there's not enough to talk about. So the fact that we were able to discuss so much in it is clearly indicative of.
Well, the movie had so many good merits that the negative aspects were just so much more glaring, right? It's
Yeah.
like, and it's that juxtaposition of good and bad at the same time. That's
Yeah.
makes for really good fodder when it comes to us being able to talk like this.
Talking.
So about 3.
It averages like about a 3.
About
It
a
sounds
3,
like
yeah.
because
It's
we
like
got
a
a
perfect 3,
2.5
2.5, 3.5.
and 3.3. So it would average to a 3. Yeah.
Happy to bring it down a little.
What's the closest movie you guys can compare this to, real quick?
The movie
Inside
that
Out.
I've thought about, but not that it's close. It's just the movie that I kept comparing it to
Right.
was The Big Short.
Okay.
Yeah, I just kept comparing it to that in my head. It was automatically like the rise and fall of, millionaires
Right.
and
Yeah,
betting on an economy and things like that. Like it was making me think of The Big Short.
The Big Short just had the good advantage of being about an abstract concept, right? Just a scheme, right?
Mhm.
As opposed to a company doing the scheme all the way
Exactly.
through, right?
Exactly.
That's just such a limiter, right? Because it would have been great if we could have like gone over to Apple and then gone over to, or Macintosh at the time or whatever, right? And then gone over to like the competitor and seeing what everybody's thinking about at the same time. Whenever, like we have our scrappy
Yeah.
underdog over here, with the BlackBerry people, and then trying to see what the big wigs were thinking about at the same time. But it's just so encapsulated in just those people,
Yeah, I will say I don't watch very many biopics, and I haven't watched the one that was like the Steve Jobs one. I don't know if anybody else has, but I could see that maybe being comparable or something in some way to this. Like, it's not my go-to type of movie to watch, but we also did mention Wolf of Wall Street. I'm not reminded of Wolf of Wall Street by this film, and Wolf of Wall Street is a great movie in my opinion. It's exceptionally well done tragic hero. And it's an example of we followed that tragic hero from beginning to end. And it's like so consistent in that. And we watched the rise and fall. But again, it's not really a biopic situation. You know what I mean? Like
not in like content or like type of movie in really any sort of way other than like how it goes. But the first thing I thought of when you asked that question was like The Whale, because it's like it's a whole story about a person who doesn't change, you know, who doesn't grow in the movie, and that becomes their downfall at the end of it. And it's like a story that might otherwise be quite flat is just absolutely brought to life by the performances. And I think The Whale is like a 5. Like for me, I know a lot of people don't like it, but for me, The Whale is like a 5-star movie. And I think it's because the story is also crystal for me.
Crystal.
Beautiful. Well, in the interest of my time in editing this.
Yes.
Anyways.
Yeah. Well,
And
thank you,
another
everybody.
thing, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, everybody, for entertaining this idea. And we'll see you all in the next one.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Good night.